Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my slightly taken aback from surprise host companion, Sejan Sarowick.
Yeah,
Sejan,
doing everything I can to make sure my coffee didn't go up my nose in that moment. Yeah.
well, I need to be honest with you, Sejan. I'm just as surprised as you. Probably how we should have opened the surprise report last week, but we had Will here. No, it's because it didn't look like GarageBand was working. Spoilers, we used GarageBand to record the show. We're giving away all our secrets in this episode. I guess. I don't know. It didn't look like it was functioning, so I clicked where the record button usually is, and it started recording. So I'm like, well, let's do it. Fuck it, I'll do it right, and then we'll do it live, or whatever that awful quote that just like run rampant over the internet for a time was. But hi, welcome to the Say Report. Again, I'm Devon Decker. He's Sejan Sarowick, and we're here to talk about everything. And it's everything again. I'm so happy. Like, I love Brendan Fraser History Month. I absolutely love Brendan Fraser History Month.
hmm
But so many other things happen in May.
Yeah, so I tried flaming hot Mountain Dew for the first time, and we didn't talk about that, and I felt like I've been keeping it in for too long.
Okay, so let's start with that. While I get my notepad all ready with
So
the
have
thoughts I
you
randomly have had.
so of the many Mountain Dew flavors, this is the continuing saga of my Mountain Dew trials here. Like, have you gotten your hands on it before, or like now that it's like more common?
So here's the deal. As a rule, I tend to avoid things that are called flamin' hot.
Okay, so I understand, right? So here's the thing. Out here about 3 weeks ago, right, smack dab in the middle of May, which is why how long I've been holding on to this. The Smiths and Krogers out here started stocking the like wonderful rainbow of Mountain Dew flavors that is available. Just like for some reason they just started stocking everything in Mountain Dew flavors. And so I saw Flamin' Hot was part of that whole thing, right? Like, and I was like, oh man, gonna finally get to try it. But the thing was, is I was like, I'm not gonna buy like a 12 pack of this, right? Like, I just want a bottle, right? And it was one of the few flavors that they had plenty of cases of, but nothing in the fridge. And so I've just been kind of like literally contemplating every day for like a moment, like, is it worth it? Is it worth getting a case? You know, you're only going to probably drink one, right? Because you're just going to, you might not even finish one. And this whole like thing has been going on in my head. Well, finally, the other day, as I was out and about on, other business, that still had me at the grocery store, but I was not there for like Flamin' Hot Mountain Dew check. But I was just like,
Were you stealing carts? I feel like you were stealing carts.
I mean, I was buying groceries. I
Oh,
just,
well,
but I mean, I was, but
but
to
you
the
weren't
point,
there
I was
just
not
for
there
Mountain Dew.
just for
I
Mountain Dew, right?
gotcha. I thought
So
you were
I
gonna
was like, I'll
steal
check, right? So I went through, yeah, I mean,
upside
so
down garbage, upside down grocery cart on top of a fire. That's a grill. I'm just saying. I mean, make sure it's not made of plastic. It should be a metal cart. I don't
yeah,
know what.
this is not a good idea, fam, because you don't know what that cart has been through in its lifetime. So so I went down the soda aisle, checked to see what they had, and they had like one bottle of it left on the shelf. So clearly people here either one lonely person was like, I'm going to put this out for that one guy that'll come by, or it's been selling pretty well. So I took it as a good sign and grabbed it. And so it's been sitting in my fridge, or was sitting in my fridge, and I've just been like pacing around trying to figure out when the best time to try it was. I was like, okay, if this ends up being really gross and you throw it out right away, that's fine. But like, if you end up enjoying it, like, what do you how? It's like a fine wine. Like, what do you pair it with? Like, what do you what do I want to have alongside it, right? So
I
I
would
ended up
imagine
ordering.
flaming hot Cheetos.
I ended up ordering barbecue the other night.
Oh, okay.
There's a really decent barbecue joint just down like a couple of blocks away from us.
I don't
So
want to step on your toes here, but I do want to stress to everybody that outside of the South, any barbecue place you go to is just going to be pretty decent. I really liked that distinction of your adjectives there. That's a
yeah,
pretty decent
I
barbecue place.
it's not
It's kind of hard to call it good
yeah,
unless
they
you're
don't.
like south of the Mason Dixon.
There's a reason that Utah barbecue is not a thing, right? So
I imagine that's just plentiful, right? Like instead
uh,
of one rib, you have two or three.
yeah, and they're all over salted. So the so I ordered a big old thing of barbecue, had this thing, cracked it open, and gave it a try. And I the final verdict is pretty mediocre. It is not really as interesting as it should be for what they want to market as Flamin' Hot Mountain Dew. It basically is just lime Mountain Dew,
Okay.
like hardcore lime Mountain Dew. But then after a while of drinking it, you realize that a heat has started to build. And I finally put my finger on it the other day, and because I then had a cinnamon Altoid later in the day and was like, there it is, that's the heat. That's the third heat. Like all it is just cinnamon lime flavored Mountain Dew, and the cinnamon is toned back so that you don't get hit with it immediately. But the more you drink the bottle, the more you start to kind of get that like feeling on the back of your tongue that like you're definitely getting like that warm feeling in your belly type thing. So that's it. That's all it is. It's actually such a huge disappointment because it's not anything more than that. After all of this, like I feel like it's the last flavor that I've really kind of come to find out here, and it ended up being kind of a bust.
So that's interesting, but it makes sense because we're living in a post Rotten Skittles world. Do you remember the Rotten Skittles, the zombie Skittles, as they
Um,
were called?
well, and the Jelly Belly, but
Right.
they
The
do the
Bertie Bott's
whole.
beans
Yeah,
from
the
Harry
box beans
Potter.
ones. Yeah, where they very specifically invented some super gross ones to go into those boxes that did not bode well for a lot of marketing and a lot of complaints and issues because a lot of people were maybe not fans of getting boxes that were mostly snot. Um,
Yeah, but how did they know what snot tasted like beforehand? Think about it. That's them having to deal with their own
I
mental
mean, that's not a
issues.
crime, though. Like, eating your own boogers is not a crime. Boxing it up and feeding it to people and calling it candy and putting Harry Potter on it to make some money, that slowly it starts to get into crime
Whatever. I
territory.
don't hear the Twitch streamers who would do Bernie Bots streams complaining about the money they ran all the way to the bank. But the zombie Skittle specifically is one of those ones where I think they reached the border. They passed the border of like good intentions when it comes to disgusting flavors. Because the zombie Skittles, they looked like regular Skittles, but any of the Skittles could be rotten flesh flavored. So you grab a handful of reds, you think you're going to get cherry flavor, suddenly rotten flesh from just one of them.
Ugh.
Yeah, and it's like, it was so bad that I threw up as soon as I got one. I'm just like, and I didn't realize I bought a bag and I thought, like, oh, I'll just buy this bag of Skittles, it'll be fine. But inside were a bunch of smaller, individually wrapped bags, which, excuse me, kind of nice in that. And the worst part about it, the zombie Skittles, is that it had unique flavors, like a blackberry Skittle and other things
Yeah.
like that. So I'm like, oh man, this flavor combination looks really good. And what I thought, I didn't think that they woke up and chose chaos. I didn't think that they woke up and chose chaos. I thought, all right, and then occasionally, like, there's gonna be the gray Skittle. And if you're one of those people who's not meticulous, I am a meticulous Skittle eater. Do not ever eat Skittles near me if you want to, like, be okay with life, is what I'm gonna say.
I always hit a point with a bag of Skittles, and this is exactly what you're talking about. You don't do, but I always hit a point with a bag of Skittles where there's like a handful left, and so I just do the whole. You're all going in, boys.
Yeah, no, that is not me.
I call it the fruit salad.
That's you tasting the rainbow, Siegen. Though it really does bother me that there's not a blue flavored Skittle in the original bag of Skittles. We have blue flavor technology. And the argument that I've heard is that blue raspberry flavor, because it's so pungent, would override the other Skittle flavors. But give me the chance to find that out, Skittle.
Well, even more divorced than that, it doesn't have to have a blue flavor to paint it blue, guys. Just to like for your
Well, it
from the
doesn't need to be
marketing
blue
standpoint.
raspberry flavor either.
Right,
Like they have
right.
the
But,
wild
like,
berry flavor that's in the berry Skittles, or tropical punch is the other one, and that's just sort of like kind of like it's like Hawaiian punchy, but with more pineapple
right,
forward.
do like Sonic does with their ocean water, right? Which
Yeah.
is, I believe, a coconut drink, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
Yes, it is. So I mean, you could do whatever you want, but that's the argument is that like blue raspberry would that's the only flavor you would taste, and I'm like, oh, there need to be blue raspberry. But getting back to everything, I what I do with Skittles is I separate them out by color, and then I eat the colors in preference from my least favorite to my most favorite.
I mean, like, I get that. I feel like that's where I start with my bag of
Yeah,
Skittles. I
yeah.
always start with the good intention of I'm going to eat all of these greens first because while I like the greens, they're not my favorite.
Do you know that they're lime again, right? That they're no longer green
No.
apple.
Oh.
At the beginning of April, I believe, maybe end of March, they switched over from green apple to lime. There was a like 6 hour stream on the internet, YouTube, and all those, where they apologized to everybody who was upset that they turned the green apple and from lime to green apple, and now that they were back,
Wait, did you say a 6 hour stream
6 hour stream
of them
of them
apologizing?
apologizing. It was the guy who plays the production assistant on Keenan. I don't know that actor's name, but he just like tweets would go up on the projection board behind him. He would read the tweet and then he would say, "From all of us at Skittles, we're sorry." And they did it for like we watched an hour and a half of it. Like we just had it on in the background for an hour and a half.
What is? I hate 2022.
It was pretty good content. That's like the worst part of it is like watching it. Like this is legitimately funny. This is them understanding their audience on a level that is kind of gross, but also good for you.
Yeah,
Does that make
but we
sense?
can't seem to hold anybody friggin' accountable for school shootings. But we can get Skittles to come out and apologize for 6 hours for changing their flavors on us.
It took 9 years, Siegen. They switched over in 2014, and they didn't come back until 2022, which is less than 9 years, 7 years maybe math. I can do it. 8 is 8 years, right?
Yeah,
Four
because
plus
I'm going to
eight.
be the one to start holding you accountable for math errors.
Sorry, but yeah. So that's the thing. Like it took time. And yeah, you're not wrong about the school shootings thing. The scarier thing to me than these are awful. The fact that we have not had a day without a mass shooting in the last, I think it's like 2 weeks, right? It's some ridiculous number that I've just unfortunately kind of gone numb to.
Well, I think the bigger problem is that it's now felt like it's become some type of morbid challenge to
Yeah,
people out there that are in a bad place already. Like it sucks.
yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one who has contextualized it in that way. Sorry, but there's footage from a liquor store, no, a convenience store robbery in Michigan, Hartford, Michigan, and it is a 12-year-old kid who robs a convenience store at gunpoint. And when the cashier behind the counter goes, "Are you serious?" He discharges the gun. He doesn't shoot anybody, but this is like 12-year-old kid, because he's been apprehended. Like this is one of those ones that has a semi-happy ending. I mean, it's sad that he's so desensitized to the fact that he is using a firearm,
Hmm.
like in a crowded area. There's no emotion on this kid's face. And then when the cops eventually caught him, he said, "I just did it to do it. I didn't even want the money. I was gonna throw it down the sewer." So like, we're living in a scary country right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna act like things are not terrible right now, but this is something. I think the larger issue that seems to keep getting lost is that this has been an ongoing problem for literally decades in
Oh
this
yeah,
country now. So like, what are we doing? Yeah, I man, but scary times, which is why I just like shooting the shit about Mountain Dew and Skittles can feel disingenuous sometimes. But then Skittles comes along and spends 6 hours of your day.
we're
How,
apologizing
how do
for
you not
that.
talk about
And
that?
that's the thing, though. But they were apologizing back in that moment where before this happened, right? And then you got to recontextualize 2022 as a year where so many things have already occurred,
Yeah.
and like, but this is where we are.
I
And
mean, we're
then,
halfway over, man.
yeah, well, we're not halfway over until July 1st.
Fair enough.
We're in the 6 month. But yeah, we're
You're
closer
right.
to
We
the
have
end than the
3 weeks to
beginning,
figure it
right?
all out, folks.
Yeah, and good luck. Because you know what else happened this year is Morbius failed twice,
I
and
can't believe they did that to themselves.
I
Why
can't
did they
believe it
shoot
failed the
themselves in the
second
foot?
time. Well, the big problem with them re-releasing Morbius is I could still just buy it for $20
Yeah,
on
now I can just
Amazon.
buy it at home.
Like
So,
no, before they released it, like I could have bought it beforehand. I did buy it beforehand. I've been waiting to morb again with Dale.
oh Jesus, we're not gonna go into the meme territory on show. We do plenty of that in our own chats. But so what was what's the deal here? Like, did they add anything to it? Was there any hope that I don't understand what
They
they
actually
thought was
probably
going
took
to.
something out because there's that whole big thing that they removed the Spider-Man line from later versions of it.
Oh,
That he doesn't say, like, that whole thing has been modified. I haven't watched it again to confirm that. So it could have been a different cut. They could have, I mean, if they were
but you're talking
smart.
about the Spider-Man line. Are you talking about the line with Vulture at the end?
At the end, yeah,
So again, more content that's meaningless to the rest of the movie is the only thing that they.
they removed. They
Oh,
removed it. They didn't add it. It's what they really should have done. Honestly, what they should have done is gotten Jared Leto, who the same day that it released in theaters did a TikTok of him holding and trying to hide the script for Morbius 2 completely as a joke, right? Like just making sure that everybody is going out there like Morbius 2 could happen if this is like, no, it's not. Morbius 2 is not going to happen because of the memes. They don't spend
yeah.
millions of dollars on a movie so you could take the piss out of it. They're going to re-release it in theaters and then they're going to be like, realize, okay, no, this isn't the market. If it had made its budget back in this one weekend that they brought it back against Top Gun Maverick, then yes, maybe we'd be looking at a world where we're finally going to get Morbius 2.
Well, what's weird is like they're trying to force cult status, and then because of that, cult capitalism on
Yeah.
it within like a 6-month window of it not being in theater. Like this is something that 10 years from now, if it has a huge like fan following at that point, and they say, hey, we're gonna, we'll put it in the Alamo Draft House for a couple of weeks just to see how it does, and then suddenly they realize they've got bank, and so maybe they do a re-release of it, and then suddenly it does get money, and then they see there's interest and they make a sequel. Like that is an impossible dream in and of itself, but that is the scenario that they are trying to emulate here. Only they're trying to emulate it, like I said, within such a short time
6
window.
weeks.
That's
It's
not how
been
it works.
6 weeks since it
That's
released.
insane.
It's absurd. It's
How
one of
could
the
they,
most
how
absurd.
could they feel like they were gonna get away with this?
I don't know. Because it's Morbin time, and that's what they honestly should have done. If you're going to re-release it and try to capitalize on the meme, and that's all it was. They were trying to capitalize on the meme with a theatrical re-release. You get Jared Leto on set, and you get him to say it's Morbin time, and you put it in the movie. And then everybody talks about that. Like, you gotta go fucking see it. They put the meme in.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
you drive
part
butts
of what
to
makes,
seats.
but part of what makes that stuff work, and part of why that kind of thing never ends up working well in the end, is because you can't be in on the joke. It's the
Yeah.
unfortunate truth of meme culture in that way. Like you don't get to be part of it, Sony. Like that's just not your. It's
that's
not
the
yours.
thing. But that's still the thing is them, if they were those assholes, right, who released the Morbin edition, like if
Right.
the re-release had some ridiculous fucking subtitle to it and it opened up with a shot of Jared Leto in costume saying, "Thank you so much for coming out to support my movie. Now let's like buckle in because it's Morbin time," people would be like, you gotta fucking see it. You cannot believe the way that they're fucking trying to cater to us and take advantage of it. And they don't care because they still make the money from those people who would go to the theater to see that like unique piece of potentially lost media.
Right. Sure, but the other side of that is it presupposes that you have a wide enough audience of people ignorant to the fact that spending money on a thing is doesn't matter if you're there to hate watch it, make fun of it, or what. If you're spending money, you're giving it money, right?
Right.
And we've learned that lesson many a time over at this point. And I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that would still participate in that, knowing that, or maybe ignorantly. It's just that that's never going to be enough to make your budget back on a multi-million-dollar movie.
Yeah. I guess for me, where I look at it is, you're right, you can't be in on the meme, but then like I guess kind of lean into the cringe of it all.
You got to be earnest. You
Yeah.
have to be earnest about it. What they should have done is they should have actually seriously leaned into the Criterion meme portion of this whole
Yeah.
thing, where people are like, "Oh, we need to get this into the Criterion collection," and people have been making like poster art and stuff for it, and all this that's been beautiful and gorgeous. And like, lean into that. Lean into into the high art fact. Like, they're. You don't get to like make the jokes with us, but if you want to provide more material, I'm not going to say no, right? Like that kind
The
of thing.
cultural significance of it. Like
Yeah.
Or give out a digital copy if they go into theaters, right?
Or
Because,
put your damn head in the sand for a few years, man. Like that's the other thing
yeah,
is like just take the hit right now and recognize that yeah, there is potential here because of the weird the way that fandoms work nowadays, but like you can't force it. So like sit back and that's the real problem is at
yeah.
the end of the day movie studios never want to hear that they can't be they can't force something into being. They always assume either you can force it into being or it's not worth it. And it's just like no, man, it's there's other options, but fine.
True. I don't know. It was weird. It's just this
Yeah.
weird situation, and I think what disappoints me most is that it made less money than Fantastic Beasts 3, which is also available on HBO Max. Like I could go watch that right now. I haven't. I'm sure I will. We should have watched that last night. No, I'm glad we watched Ted 2.
Well, part of
But
that though part of that you gotta think about is that Fantastic Beasts 3, while being on HBO, is still in a bunch of theaters around here because
right.
it is one that families can still kind of pop out to kids, especially with school just ending this week out here and stuff like that. Whereas Morbius, the re-release, is not. There's a couple of theaters that I would have to drive. I would have to make it a point to find one where it was playing and go to. Whereas I could walk into any theater. So what I'm getting at is that while it made less money than Fantastic Beasts out here, at least it's not playing as widely as that. As much as they are both kind of competing for the bottom at
well,
this
I mean,
point.
it was in double the amount of auditoriums as Fantastic Beasts. So I
Wow.
mean, you're where you are geographically. That's actually a very interesting sample set of data in the fact that this movie is in twice as many auditoriums across the country, but
That's
because
embarrassing.
of
That is so embarrassing.
yes, that's why it's a discussion topic and not just like a weird footnote in history. The fact that it got beaten by a movie that people already didn't want to see because of weird controversies around it and all of that.
To be fair, it also has its own set of controversies
Yes. Oh
around it.
no,
Leto is not
I
exactly
agree.
free from a
Yeah,
lot of the same criticisms that, say, Johnny Depp
Johnny
might
Depp, I
be.
agree. I'm right there with you. But I mean, like the race to the bottom. These two movies couldn't be more similar in so many ways.
Yeah, yeah.
It's excuse me. And also, Morbius is one of those movies that was delayed 7 times before its release date.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's been an interesting story. I mean, it's a movie. Have you seen it yet? Have you experienced the Morbin
So
siege?
I am going to eventually see it, but man, I tried starting it the other day and I got 10 minutes in and realized I was going to watch it while I was at work because I didn't want to dedicate an evening to it. And so I got 10 minutes in and was just like, "Ugh, I can't even I couldn't even bring myself to give it half of my attention for
It
the
needs
day.
all your attention. It does. It demands it. I
Well,
liked it.
yeah.
I liked Morbius completely unironically. Like I went to the theater and I'm like, this is a pretty fun time at the movies.
I think what it was that the first 10 minutes of that movie is the whole helicopter stuff and landing in the cave and all this that is in the preview, right?
Yeah.
So having already these feelings about this movie based on what little I've seen of it through previews and stuff, to only be watching that footage again really didn't sit right. And that so like part of that is just that I need to get past into some material that might actually be new to me before I start actually like you know what it is. Can I get just a Matt Smith cut?
Yeah, I mean it's everywhere on the internet. That's
Yeah.
the thing. It takes about 47 minutes for that movie to kick off because you need fucking Matt Smith. You need the Matt Smith of it all. Like Jared Leto is doing his Jared Leto thing, and then here comes the 11th Doctor to be like, "No, this is fucking comedy." Right? Like, do you understand it? It's the same reason why the Venom movies, for whatever people will say about those, the Venom movies work because Tom Hardy realizes there's a lot of fucking humor in this horror story.
Those movies are fun,
Yeah.
at least, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's the problem is that I'm getting from that early couple of moments of that movie and everything from the marketing and stuff, up until the whole memification of it, was that it didn't feel like there was any like joy to what was going on, and so. If I want my joyless vampire Marvel movie, I'm just gonna go watch Blade, thanks. But like the ways in which that's not what they've now leaned into. They've now decided to look at the comedy. It's like you should have realized that there was fun to be had here while you were making it, gang.
Yeah. And also, you're leading into the comedy that is laughing at you, not with you.
Right.
Like the understand you need that's a big distinction. But it's this year's Justice League Snyder cut It is Zack Snyder's Justice League of this year. So far, I mean, you can have a different one, you can have a different opinion on that, but it is one of these things where, like, people demanded it, and then Sony's like, well, that worked out for them, so let's do it.
Yeah, except we're finding out it didn't. The more and more that we hear about Justice League and the Snyder Cut, the more we're finding that a lot of people are considering it just kind of a waste of everybody's time and money.
Right, and I understand that, but you need to think the way that executives think, and it is one of those things where, like, well, the people demanded it, we can give it to them, and we can give it to them it doesn't cost them much extra capital to re-release Morbius to theaters.
Right.
It's the movie's already completed. It would have cost them, and that's the thing, where, like, if you record a new intro video thanking people, thank you so much for your support on social media. It's because of you that we're back in the theater. Now remember, it's Morbin time. Throws on some sunglasses, CSI Miami theme song.
Drives off in a fucking Corvette into the sun, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if it were just Michael Keaton doing it, like, make it as absurd as possible. And they didn't do it. They didn't lean into the cringe, because even if they were cringy again, that's them creating content, like you said. And then at the end of the movie, you have pre-order today, the Criterion Collection, and it doesn't actually go. It goes to a website, but it's all sold out. and if people are like, "Oh no, I missed it," but, like, there was never gonna be one. We just made a fake website.
Exactly right. Oh man.
The I don't know how you say Criterion with Morb in it.
Morbterion?
The Morbterion series?
The Morbius version?
I don't know. But it's one of those things where I was excited to see Morbius ever since I saw Bad Boys for Life, the third Bad Boys movie. Yeah. They still fucked that up. They fucked that up so hard. And the guy sitting next to me, like, tapping on my shoulder after the trailer, like, that's like Morbius from the Spider-Man show, right? And I go, yeah, it's the same guy. He's like, man, they did him dirty. And I'm like, they did him dirty on the animated show, but, like, that's where we all know him from. And he's like, what, for real? And we have this whole long conversation about the character of Morbius. And then we have to still sit there and watch Bad Boys for Life together. He's a stranger, man.
Yeah. The Morbius on the animated show felt like, for some reason, there was a lot of Lobo going on with him, and a lot of, like, the design, at least.
In his design, like, definitely. Yeah. That's always sort of been the Morbius thing, is the leather trench coat and that, but his hair color and the fact that they, like, gave him weird hair in places. Mm-hmm. Like, it did feel like there was some Lobo there.
Well, and the, like, weird, like, tentacle hands. Is that a Morbius thing? No, that was the show, right?
It's not they're sucker hands. They're not tentacles. Because, like, tentacle hands puts a very different
because they
thought.
Have the suckers, like, on them. But, yeah.
Yeah, that's because the animated series, they didn't want him drinking people's blood. They're like, that imagery is too scary for children. So what we're going to make it instead is he touches you with his gross mouth hands and sucks away your plasma. We can't say blood. We have to say he's feeding on people's plasma.
Wow.
And let's just make him, like, he's scarier in the animated series. Like, when I say they did him dirty in that, it's not so much that they actually did him wrong. It's just the fact that that's not the Morbius from the comics, right. That character. And then they go on later, like the character of Morbin, who you can buy right now, a Marvel Legends figure for $6 at literally any retail outlet. You go in, you pick up a Morbin figure, and they're like, that'll be $6. Because that's how beloved that character is. Like, it's also weird because, like, they could have leaned into that skit and said that it was Morbius. People wouldn't know. But he's an ancient spirit. There was that whole time in the Spider-Man comic books. I don't know if you remember this.
With, like, Lady Spider, with, like, the old, like, spider gods thing?
The spider god. Madam Web is, I believe, who you're speaking of. Yeah, going to be played by Dakota Johnson. going forward. But that the whole spider totem thing, which was
Hmm.
how they sort of gave him organic web shooters and stuff, it was a weird in-universe explanation to make him more like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
You know that this is the stuff that then goes on to be the basis for all of the Broadway show, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is all of the stuff that ends up being in that. That's when you end up with like Madam Web being this like this woman in a harness like up in the air surrounded by fake legs like singing operettas and people swinging at her and then falling to their death.
Yep. Let's what is it? Spider-Man Break the Darkness? Is that the name of that show?
Yeah, Spider-Man Break the Dark or Open the Dark or
It's
Turn on
I
the
think it's
Lights
Break
or
the Dark. I think
yeah.
it's that's what it is. What a stupid title. But yeah, that is where they crib from for that. So we're probably not going to see a movie version of that for a long time. Mostly because they retconned all that stuff with One More Day. Which have we ever talked about One More Day? Have we ever
Well,
had
this is
the
actually a
discussion
good
about
chance to
One More
talk about
Day?
One More Day because in addition to all of this, how much of this is overseen by Joe Quesada, right?
Yeah.
Quesada, am I saying his name right?
No, Casada, you were right.
Yeah, yeah. Who has just left Marvel and famously had some real issues with the ways that Spider-Man was handled under his watch for the last 20 years. So, like, I'm curious, like, where that all falls into this too. But I am aware of One More Day. Yes,
I mean, one more day or one day more or whatever it
One
is.
Day More. I believe it's One More Day because I think the One Day More would be way too on the nose for.
Yeah, exactly. Um, the big problem that I have with that is so Aunt May dies. That's the impetus of everything that goes on in that story.
Right.
And Peter Parker's like, I can't fucking go on without Aunt May, as if he hasn't lost so many other people in his life. Like they're like, oh, this guy who's like losing people every 3 issues and like seems to understand how to work through grief and has sort of become a poster character for understanding what grief is and that losing Aunt
Almost like
May
his realist superpower is the ability to take
to
on grief and
to
turn it into motivation as
yeah.
opposed to depression. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, his superpower is the ability to process
Yeah,
emotion.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important, and it's one of those things where I think that's why Spider-Man connects with so many people, is because as much fun as it is to like think about being a superhero and having no consequences and stuff, it's interesting to see this character who like is mired in the consequences of his actions, but never lets them stop him.
Some might say he's kind of the definitive difference between a Marvel character and a DC character, and part
Damn.
of why Marvel is as beloved as it is versus some feelings that people have about DC.
Yeah,
Just saying.
yeah, really good points being made up by everybody here at the table. So Aunt May passes away, and Aunt May passes away from like old age. It's not one of those situations where you can't reveal your powers, Peter, so I'm gonna go save the dog in the middle of the tornado.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of those ones where Aunt May was in her 60s in the 60s when Peter Parker was first introduced as a character, and they're like, oh, she's getting older, and we see him deal with the type of grief that he deals with where he feels some responsibility. How what is the Spider-Man going to be like where there's nothing he could have done to prevent it? How is he going to handle that grief? And spoilers for a you got 15-year-old story at this point, right? Oh
Right.
my god. I can't believe it's been so long since One More Day. I just kind of keep want to saying one day more and then sing songs. He makes a deal with the in-universe devil with his Mephistopheles.
Hmm.
That's the Marvel devil, because if there's a thing from literature or actual belief that they can steal and put into their comic books, they're gonna do it. That scene in Spider-Man where J. Jonah Jameson is like, I want to copyright the name Green Goblin, I don't want a quarter every time somebody says it. Like, that's really great satire about how Marvel does things.
Yeah.
We want to make money every time people talk about the character Thor. So let's do a Thor comic book. These are just the facts. So Spider-Man goes to the devil of the Marvel Universe, Mephistopheles, and offers to sell his soul to resurrect Aunt May. which I
It's
feel
bonkers. It's fucking
like
bonkers for
like
this
yeah, just
character,
those
and like,
words saying that. Also,
well,
it's one
and
of
it's
those.
not like a, and it's not a what if story or anything like that. This is like mainline. This is what's going on in Spider-Man's world now, right?
Yeah,
Like that was, yeah,
this is.
because it's is
It is
man,
essentially he was married to Mary Jane. He was working for Stark Technologies. He may have even started Parker Industries. I feel like that was a thing that had already existed before this all thing went down. Basically, Spider-Man was doing too well for himself.
yep. And infamously, like I was saying, Joe Quesada came in and was like, "No, no, let's fuck his day up."
Yeah,
And a lot of people have not taken kindly to that over the years.
right.
So yes, he loses Mary Jane, and that ends up being an ongoing theme for the next 20 years. Is this what eventually leads to the whole thing with Octavius too?
The Superior Spider-Man.
Yeah,
That's I want to say like 6 years later, and it was because of like where do we go from here? And
yeah, the
it's
ripple effects of
beautiful
this. Yeah.
because my biggest issue with One More Day, right, is Spider-Man goes to the devil and is like, I want to make this deal with you, and the devil's like, all right, but I don't really need your soul. I just really like your marriage with Mary Jane is over, right? Like that's your soul. That's what's representative of your soul to me. Because like also you can't make Spider-Man this guy who like makes a literal deal with the devil for his soul.
Yeah, right.
It's it's ridiculous. But there's this moment where like Mephistopheles is like, do you want to shake on it? And Aunt May is there because heaven and hell now are confirmed to exist in the Marvel universe, right? Something that like, well, hell probably exists, but it's another dimension, right? But
Right.
then
That's
no,
I mean, Ghost Rider
yeah,
is
exactly.
our window into that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Nightcrawler as well. Like the reason why it smells like brimstone is because his teleportation happens through that hellscape. That is actually the hell of the universe. Fun stuff like that.
Man, can you imagine Ghost Rider Man? Like a Spider-Man Ghost Rider, which I'm sure has happened at some point.
There,
But like that would have been a such better way to go with that. And
yeah.
not
If
like your
he's like,
marriage
you
with
have
Mary
to
Jane has
become
to
the
end, but you
vengeance
have to,
thing.
yeah, you
Yeah,
become a vengeance demon.
there is a spirit of vengeance Spider-Man because he exists in the Sony PlayStation game. His costume is there.
Nice.
And it's awesome. Like that's a good thing. I've never read any of the books, but I know it's gone there. Much like Cosmic Ghost Rider, Cosmic Space Ghost, which is Frank Castle becoming Ghost Rider
Yeah, yeah.
and being like, oh, the whole fucking justice thing that needs to go into Galactic. So yeah. So everything that we're just talking about. So he sees Aunt May before he makes this deal with Mephistopheles, and she's like, Peter, I don't want you to do this. I'm weirdly happy now that I've moved on. I'm back with Uncle Ben again.
Right?
Like
Yeah.
it's like one of these things where she's like, I've been through so much. Like, it's my time to finally rest. And Peter Parker's like, nope, I don't give a shit about your feelings. I need you alive to like make me casserole. And he takes the deal. Like, it's one of the most selfish moments in the history of Spider-Man.
To make me casserole.
Well, what else? I need you to make me casserole and worry. Even though I'm
Yeah,
like
no,
a 40-year-old man who's married.
I mean, jeez. And then like, all of the weird implications that come from the idea of like, I mean, you ripped her out of heaven, bro. Like this is starting to turn into like a Neil Gaiman story. Like
Yeah. And she loses it because everybody loses their memory of what occurred, except for like some people who don't. Like there's that whole thing where Mary Jane may or may not remember what happened before one more day. Like they've done a bunch of stuff with that. That is stupid, but it does. It leads into Superior Spider-Man because Otto Octavius on his deathbed is like, you have all this freaking power and you waste it, you squander it. So I'm going to show the world what a superior Spider-Man can be. So he supplants his consciousness over Peter Parker's body. And then you have some of the best fucking comics.
Spider-Man stories.
Like
Yeah.
some of the best Spider-Man stories. But again, like nothing will match to me the fact that Peter Parker looking at Aunt May being like, I'm happy in heaven. And him being like, no, mine. Like That's always in the back of my head, and it takes a
That's
lot to
just
like just not think about it.
yeah,
But during the Superior Spider-Man story, there is a moment where the Peter Parker consciousness like threatens to like not act to save a little girl, hoping that it will allow him to take over like the consciousness of his body again. And then Otto Octavius is like, that was a really selfish thing. Like, do you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing? Because what you just did is not good.
right.
And it's just, there's a lot of Peter Parker problems. There's a lot of Spider-Man problems. There's a reason why a lot of people are ready for someone like Miles Morales to take over. Why, when he showed up in the Ultimate Spider-Man, it was a breath of fresh air. Why Spider-Gwen, the Ghost Spider, like means more. Because we're kind of tired of Peter Parker's shit in like
Yeah,
the nicest way possible.
no, I mean, I think that's true even when it comes to the movies and stuff too, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, I'm very excited to see where Spider-Man goes as far as the film world goes. I mean, this even includes the Morbius stuff and all of that nonsense too, is because there is such a rich vein there to mine for more content, more, more creative content. And now that we are in a place in both the Sonyverse and in the MCU where Peter does not necessarily need to be the star of the show anymore, I am super excited. I mean, it's why everybody's super looking forward to the new Spider-Verse movie, right?
Yeah.
Like
Across the Spider-Verse Part 1.
yeah.
Which should be exciting. I don't know. I think Oscar Isaac says Spider-Man 2099. Big
Mhm.
fan of that character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is. It's one of those situations. And also, in the Sony Spider-Man universe, whatever it's called, the SSU, I think is what it is,
Yeah.
SSMU. Apparently, we're getting a Craven movie. We're getting a Madam Web movie with Dakota Johnson, as previously stated. There was a chance for Morbius too, but I think that ship has sailed and sank off the harbor.
Well, they sank it themselves.
I
Like
know they
I
did, and
would
I
have I
think they
would have
might have done it
believed
on purpose. But
maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was self-sabotage. Oh
listen,
man.
all of y'all, it's self sabotage. Yeah. All right, but that's So I think that's enough for Spider-Man talks. Unless there's anything else you want to add.
I didn't even intend to talk about some Spider-Mans.
Well, we
So
talk. You talk about Morbius. It's kind of hard not to,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, Sony's gonna figure it out somehow.
I'm so excited for Multiverse of Madness coming to Disney Plus
Yeah, so
on June
what's the
22nd.
date count on that drop? Is that 45 days after or
I haven't done the math out yet,
but it's definitely
unfortunately.
not 90, right?
It's not 90, and I imagine it would be 45. That seems to be where they're going. But it dropped, the first weekend of May, right?
The movie itself came
Yeah.
out? Yes. Yeah.
So it came out the first weekend of May, and it's dropping in the third week of June. So
Mhm.
it's 6 weeks, which is roughly 45 days.
Yeah, I'm really excited that I get to show it to people and watch it again and all that good stuff.
I have so many things I want to discuss about that movie. So I guess the big thing is we've recorded our little time capsule episode. That's a fun little discussion on the piece, but 2 weeks after that. So let's say conservatively, I don't know why I said it like that. Let's say conservatively, first episode in July, we're probably going to do a bigger dive into Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah,
Because
I
that
might
should
say
be,
it more conservatorially, but yes.
yeah. I love our language while also hating our language. That's just a fact. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. Miss Marvel starting up this week, which is good. But
Yeah.
something I'd like to discuss, and if you didn't watch it, that's fine. But teaser stuff in the middle of the episode. It's a good point to like get down onto digital tape some of the things that we want to talk about going forward. Did you check out the first episode of the new season of The Orville?
I've not yet, no, because
Okay.
that's a Tessa and I show, and we need to. I finally get the sound system hooked up. I don't know
Nice.
if I've talked about this.
No.
I got
So-
so I had a surround sound system. My girlfriend bought me one for Christmas a year ago, and it's been awesome. And but we've been doing some redesigning on the house. We were trying to figure out if we wanted to look into moving or in things like that, and that just seemed like that was going to be too much right now. Housing markets being insane and all that sort of stuff, and then on top of that, Utah itself, like the housing market within the state is like a whole other new level of insane. And so we decided what was better was to focus on doing stuff in the house, right? So fast forward to us installing an office in our den and stuff like that, so that Tess has a place to work from home still and all that. And we had to redesign some stuff. So my sound system hadn't been up for a bit, so I've been kind of bumming out because like Batman came out and I didn't have my sound system up. A couple of games that Tiny Tina had come out and I didn't have my sound system up and stuff like that, right? But I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to have it back in place. So I got it set back up, and I kept running into these issues because of the way that the room is now set up. I didn't have enough speaker cable the first time, and then I finally ordered the speaker cable that I wanted specific, and the caps and everything I needed to get that together. That put it all together, had everything hooked up, and then I went to go put the sound cable from the TV to the back of the sound system, and I had to move where the deck was for the sound system, and the cable was about 2 feet too short. So I then had to order that, and I had to wait for that to come in. So it took me like 5 days to do what should have only taken me 30 minutes to set this whole friggin' thing up. But I did it finally the other day, and so we are super excited that we've got that. We've got the big screen TV, the sound system hooked up, and now the Orville is back. So I think that's going to be one of the first big things we watch on it.
Okay, cool. But so spoilers a little bit. We're not going to talk about it, and I'm not going to talk about Orville before you get to watch it. But we are going to have to discuss that first episode.
Yeah, well,
I got some questions.
Well, let me watch it first. There's a lot of implications about this season possibly being kind of just a big old finale you send off for the show because it got caught in that weird COVID limbo and also cost so much that Fox had dropped it, but then Hulu picked it up. That like, there's a lot going on that we should definitely talk about with that. I'm excited to watch it, no matter what direction it goes in. We've gotten 2 seasons so far of some of the best Star Trek television I've ever personally enjoyed. So if we even get 2 or 3 more episodes out of this with like higher budgets and good stories, I'll be happy. It looks to me from the previews, it feels like they're really leaning into the later Next Generation style Star Trek movies. You know, you got like First Contact and Nemesis and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, oh, we've had the budget now, and so that we can get some really interesting actors and some really interesting special effects, and we can tell these larger stories. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right, and in a lot of ways, it feels like that first episode might be the connective tissue bridge between what was and what will be. Because I mean, here's the thing. Here's the review that I'll give so far, and this is completely spoiler free. Is my father slept through the entire episode, and then we're like, "Do you need to watch?" He's like, "No, I know what they're doing. I'm excited for the next one because he's seeing the trailer for the next one, and that seems like something's going to actually happen." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Where I think the first one is good, but I have some issues with timeline that I really want to discuss with somebody who actually knows the show.
Yeah, well, Tess and I will definitely get on it then, because right, cool. I mean, it's just that show is like her baby.
There's, I understand it. It's one of those. But yeah, sorry. So that's it. So we are going to talk about the Orville. So if you still haven't checked it out, hopefully by next episode we can, be here in the studio and have a discussion about just the first episode. I don't know about the second one. We got a crazy week this week in terms of other stuff. I think we should release it here, let people know. Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe, we have an episode coming out on Friday because it will be the 10th of June, and we try to release close to the 9th. And it should be just our Uncut Gems episode, right? Because we're doing Uncut Gems because everything's been leading to Uncut Gems. But also on the 8th, in addition to Miss Marvel on Disney Plus, we're getting a new Adam Sandler movie. And we didn't know what we should do when a new Adam Sandler movie comes out because it's the first time since we started doing the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe stuff.
Yeah, so since starting that show, we haven't really had like an Adam Sandler movie drop. And so we've had a Happy Madison movie drop, but we decided not to touch that one because Sandler was not a focus, not in that one, right?
He wasn't in it at all. And we also had the sequel to Hotel Transylvania, but again, Adam Sandler's not in that anymore. Yeah, this is the first one where it is Adam Sandler front and center. It's another Netflix production one, and we are going to also be trying to apply our theory to that. So there'll be 2 Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe episodes on Friday. If you're looking forward to something that's a little different from the Say Report, check that one out. That's our other show where we try to determine what movies of Adam Sandler's exist in a shared cinematic universe based on our findings.
Yeah. No, what I did get to watch was some Chip and Dale.
Okay, yeah. Can we promise not to get into a fight about Chip and Dale? Like, can we have a discussion about Chip and Dale and not get into a fight?
I probably, because I
Okay.
don't think that Chip and Dale is the kind of movie you put your heart and soul into.
Okay, good. That's sort of why I want to make sure that it's not going to cause a fight between us. I don't want to fight over Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
I look, so it sounds like maybe Devon's first impressions of the film are not so hot. So I will say right here and now, I enjoy the hell out of the movie. I've seen it multiple times since it has come out. I have been lucky enough to be around people that wanted to watch it at different points, and I was very happy to do it again. So I have watched it 3 times, I think, at this point with various groups, and each time just adore the hell out of it.
I mean, it's a fine movie. It's definitely a movie too. Like, it's not a sandwich, to use that old phrase that I'm quite fond of saying. I think there's some really great like little moments of fan service in it. I will forever love that the Avengers United We Stand Tigra is in the movie. Like,
Hmm.
that felt like very much a reference for me. And I know that it's a reference for other people, but that's a character that I have a mint in package figure of, because it's just like, what an interesting design for this character who, they had to sort of sanitize her a little bit to be in a kid's cartoon.
You mean like the naked, like weird vixen-esque body that she has was not going to work on a kid's show?
Well, I mean, she's not naked like Cheetah, but
Yeah,
she
that's
does
true.
wear a very, very tight, like,
Revealing.
black two-piece bikini
Right.
as her stuff. Like, it's furry culture coming into it and all that, and they wanted her to not wear that stuff, but then the comic book code had some things to say about it, and they got to explore more. I don't know. It's that whole ridiculousness about what is and isn't okay, because Cheetah's been running around naked in DC Comics since her inception.
Well,
Or
and then we can
yeah,
get even deeper into just the weird need to have these female figures that are combined with an animal, which then somehow gives them the loophole to make them naked on page. Yes,
yeah.
there's a
It's
lot going on
There's a
there
lot
that is
going
not
on with
even
that. Yeah.
even with the character. Yeah, that's not even part of the character, just part of the culture. That we
Well,
should
I mean,
probably
one of the
discuss.
reasons that one of the other arguments is to, like, we want her to, in the clothing that she's in, is to accentuate the fact that she does have those parts.
Mm.
It's like, like, she just has to be furry. Like, how would people know that she's a female unless we show, like, the representation? It's a weird character. Tigra's one of those weird characters, but it was nice seeing her in the Chip and Dale movie. I liked that. I dug the whole Peter Pan as the villain part of it, even though that's weirdly controversial when you consider the voice actor for Peter Pan and how his relationship with Disney ended up going, until his ultimate suicide in the 40s.
Yeah, so to
Like,
like weirdly kind of ghost that into the actual character was a little awkward for sure. Yep.
yeah. I I I guess the reason why I wanted to make sure it's not going to start a fight is everywhere on social media. And this is sort of my first example of, we talk about with social media that everybody's always putting their best foot forward, right? We don't share the day where we got a flat tire, but we will share the day where we got an extra scoop of ice cream. So, it sort of sanitizes the sadder parts of life, social media. Does that make sense? Is
Yeah,
that what I'm trying to say?
I
Like,
I understand what you're trying to say. I don't
yeah.
know if I necessarily agree with it because like the idea of like suffer porn, like the people putting
And
their
doom scrolling and all of
and
that. I
yeah,
understand.
and
Yeah.
then like wanting to like oh like pity me because I got a flat tire is more the attitude nowadays. But
Yeah.
or I got my ice cream, but then they made it fat free or some nonsense, and then everybody fights about it. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
it goes both ways. But the initial phenomenon that, like, where I don't know if it's true or not, but it was talked about, where if you're on social media all the time, everybody is always putting their best self on social media. So
at
of
the very
course,
least, we all know that like
yeah,
nobody is their true self on social media.
yeah,
Whether it's their best self is up for discussion, but the idea being that there's stuff about us that we hide on social
yes.
media. We self-edit for sure.
It's The Stranger by Billy Joel in full effect, social media. But because of that, and the way that I feel that way, where like everybody is just going to the nth when it comes to discussing Chip and Dale is nobody's like really talking about the nuance points. Everybody's like, it was so fucking good. I loved it. Da, da, da. And I'm just like, I didn't love it. Like, and I don't really want to get involved in the conversation with the people about the fact that I didn't love it. Like it.
I mean, you know, if you didn't enjoy a thing, it's not fun to talk about. I get that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And that's the thing. And it's not one of those situations where it was very much what they set out to do. I think that they would look at it and view it as a success.
I mean, especially because I do appreciate that it's not something that was your jam, but it has gotten quite a bit of success in terms of watch numbers and criticism and stuff like that. So, like, yes, I do think all around they would probably consider it a successful endeavor.
Yeah, I guess it just felt thin to me. Like, I wish that there had been a little bit more substance to it. Everything just felt, I don't know, like, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me, the whole plot and what he's doing. Like, I don't know. The movie just, it doesn't jive with me in a way that for everyone
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't want to drive the whole point home about how it's like, I don't really like, but I disagree on some of those facts. Like,
That's fine.
like, I think it's pretty clear. Like, one of the things that was been pointed out to me every time we watch it is it's really interesting that Disney made bootlegging the villain. Like clearly this is like it is an advertisement for Disney, right? For Disney, right? Like, and you have to acknowledge that going in. And like more than anything, it is just one big just commercial for all of their properties. And some people don't take kindly to that. A lot of people have actually levied that as if that's a criticism against that film. But I think you pointed out best is like, I think they would say they succeeded in doing what they set out to do, and that was to create a giant like love fest for Disney stuff, right?
I mean, it's their Space Jam New Legacy. It's their Ready Player One.
Well,
it is look at everything we own or everything that we can get access to.
Yeah. It's Disney finally getting to do Roger Rabbit themselves rather than having to depend on somebody else handling the property, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
so
I'm pretty sure that's a Buena Vista movie, isn't it?
With Roger Rabbit? Well, yes, but it is done in conjunction with other companies, and so they had to acquiesce a lot of power and a lot of like they did.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, yes, Roger Rabbit shows up at Disney. And there is like Roger Rabbit is a Disney character by all accounts. Yes, but yeah, this idea that like anyway, so this idea that bootlegging is what's going on, and this guy that was once in the business and got kind of shafted by it is now going to shaft the business. It's pretty. To your original point, it's kind of thin, like right, like it's not a well thought out plot, and it clearly doesn't work out for him because that's the whole thing is that two guys that aren't even cops bring it down, right? So I don't disagree in some of that regard, but I think that's just baked into the kind of story it is. I just like I said, I adore the hell out of it. But to your points about like some of the ways in which it kind of it glosses over stuff or ignores certain things, like there is tacit acknowledgement of Chip and Dale as characters throughout Disney history, especially once you get into the garage where it's full of all of the memorabilia. But yet the ways in which the story is told, there's no implication that anything before Chip and Dale was Rescue Rangers exists. But there's an entire history of Chip and Dale for decades before Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers as being Disney like stars and characters and stuff. Right, like there's Chip and Dale cartoons and things like that.
Yeah, and the Disney Afternoon clearly exists. Like, so they weren't like this breakout first of their kind sort of situation.
There's this definite weird gap if you're like a Disneyphile where you're like, well, Chip and Dale were always a thing. This was not their only thing or first thing, but this movie posits a world in which it is, but then shows you evidence that it's not.
Right. And I guess
so there's definitely stuff like that throughout this movie, which is why I can definitely understand why somebody would not fall in love with this film.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm having fun. It's fun pointing out the references and everything. The incendiary comment that I made was it's Ready Player One. I compared it to Ready Player One, and that almost started a big fight in the house, specifically with Dale. It started the big fight between me and Dale almost. But I'm like, but you just need to understand that a lot of that movie is just look at everything that we have access to put on the screen.
Right. So I think more to be more clear here, we should say you're comparing it to Ready Player One, the movie, right?
Yes,
because that's the other
book,
thing is it's infamously one of those movies where people that are fans of the book will be like, well, the movie's a terrible representation of it. I don't think it is. I think it's actually a fine representation of it. But that idea being that the movie does kind of and Space Jam: A New Legacy, as you already pointed out, they do revel in like the whole like, hey, we have access to this. Why would we not not use it, right? I mean, it's the same thing that the Lego movie does, and
Yeah.
what, by all accounts, the new Mario movie is trying to do, except Nintendo keeps coming in and being like, no, 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 we don't want it to be like that. And everybody working on it is like, this is what people are gonna pay money to see, though, bro. Like, but to Nintendo's credit, they have an idea for a vision and they want to stick to it. So we'll see how that one turns out.
I'm
But yeah,
excited for
it's a
Morbius
style.
and Mario. So
But it's a genre, but it is a new kind of genre. It's kind of like a postmodern genre of film that could only exist once all of these companies existed that own all of this crap, right? Is this like weird pastiche like of just here's all of your fun stuff all in one place. It's not the first time this has ever happened in history. I think you and I actually have some very specific plans to talk about some very early
yes,
types of this stuff,
or at least
but
share
that
those plans. Yeah.
but it kind of all goes back to the multiverse conversation that you and I don't know if we've had this on the show yet because I think it happened in the middle of May, right?
Yeah.
This idea that the multiverse pop culture has an understood vocabulary for anything can happen, and it's going to be considered canon, and that is the concept of the multiverse. It's not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination, but Marvel and Disney have now made it so ubiquitous with what everything is that it's okay that all this stuff can exist in the same space, and you don't really have to question it. The problem is that you run into these weird holes and these gaps, and as an audience member you either have to accept it or not, and either choice is a fine one. Now I'm not saying that like in order to like, get with the times, old man, like it's not that attitude, but it sounds like you're having an issue with just kind of just buying into this idea that Disney, as far as they're concerned, is like you're either with us or not. And so it sucks because you're not, and that makes it no fun to be a part of and watching everybody else kind of just go with it. But it really is just this idea of we wanted an excuse to just have all of these people meet, and so our excuse now is that this type of world exists, and like okay, sure.
Yeah, and I guess where it comes from for me, because I'm not trying to say like let's not have fun or anything like that. It's one of those situations where everybody is going to love this Chip and Dale movie. Everybody's going, and by all accounts, I haven't really met anybody else besides like my mother. My mother's like, no, I mean it was just an entertaining movie. It's not gonna move any sort. And I'm like, good. I'm glad that I'm not the only one who watched that movie and was like, okay, they did what they did. And she's like, no, it was just Space Jam. It was Space Jam with Disney stuff. And I'm like, good. That's how I felt about it. But it's one of those situations where everybody is lavishing this praise upon Chip and Dale, and if it wasn't Disney characters, because we have the proof of it, people would be saying, oh, it's just a cash grab. Oh, they're just putting that stuff in there to get people to watch the movie. And it's like,
I think you're talking about New Legacy, right?
well, I'm talking about New Legacy, but again, I compared it to Ready Player One because there was that talk about like, why is all this stuff in there? Why is it existing? And I'm like, well, it exists because it's the internet, and they're trying to, you know, represent internet culture. And as we already discussed with Morbius, to be like weirdly thematic in this episode, corporations tend not to understand the point of internet humor.
They hear the conversation, but they don't understand what's going on in it at all. So they just kind of try and add their 2 cents in, like that awkward kid that showed up at the party too late and maybe wasn't even invited in the first place. But there's this real beauty though in comparing it to Space Jam specifically, because I think it benefits a lot from the initial negative reaction to New Legacy that has slowly turned into like shut up, I'm just watching it for a good time, and enough people have kind of made that point of just like, yeah, I mean, you know, the kids just keep putting it on, so I guess it's a movie that is now in my life, which it's, to be frank, the same way people felt about the original Space Jam around me. So like anybody that remembers the original Space Jam fondly and thinks that New Legacy somehow shit on its quote unquote legacy is misremembering the original Space Jam release. But that idea that like we had that come out last summer. It kind of hit everybody's ear a little bad, and like there was a lot of content about like why it was just like cash grabs and not worth it, and this isn't art and blah 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 blah. But the wave back against it and the reveal that it has done decent numbers for HBO. It didn't like break any records, which is why they weren't like touting it immediately, but it did do its job to as far as HBO is concerned. They considered it a success, not a bomb or anything like that in the last year. It's hard with streaming stuff, as we've talked in the past. Like there's ways to track stuff, but not perfect ways. But then with that idea, right? We're living kind of in that second part still with Space Jam. So this movie then benefits from coming out in that moment where, as a culture, we're actually coming to terms with the fact that we're okay with this. Then you're right to point out that it is also then packaged better. I mean, frankly,
Yeah.
like we're not talking about the idea of like, why is this mass murderer from this Stanley Kubrick film allowed to be on the same screen as Bugs Bunny? We're just like, oh, it's cute that they were able to get the Mantis from Kung Fu Panda to show up in the same scene as Pumbaa to show up in the same scene as the dwarf, right? Like,
Yeah.
because, like that joke worked for me.
That joke is very good. Is what I laughed.
Yeah, like that stuff just works for me. So like, yes, it is a thin attempt at just getting a good chuckle out of you to have a good time with these characters. But my question then is, why
What's
does
the
it
problem
have to
with
be
that?
more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and that's where it is. But it's just, I guess the conversation I wanted to have is like, why is this something that's going to be accepted, and as we've seen, is accepted, where Ready Player One, and again, that movie has a lot going around it, but that moment of just like fan service and member berries,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, well,
it's not
so
much different.
well, so I will say that if there is a sequel to it or anything else within that world, fingers crossed for a Darkwing Duck movie.
Oh my
But
god,
if there is anything else that comes from that franchise, if it becomes a franchise, they have to do more next time. They can't just ride that wave again, right? And the perfect example of that is looking at Lego Movie to Batman, Lego
Yeah,
Batman. The idea being that in the Lego Movie, they kind of get away with just like every kind of 20 minutes, they just introduce a new Lego character that you love, and that kind of moves the story along, and that's great and all. But like, you can't do that again. As we saw with Lego Movie 2, they had to push and shove a story into that movie, and it did not work as well, right? But then you look at the way that Lego Batman worked, and it was able to do that while also encapsulating a really good story that improved on the character and actually brought like something interesting to that world. So they have to do that if they ever want to go back to this well. They can't just do this again. This was fun this time, but if they make a habit out of just like putting together these, just like, as I said before, just these like pastiche films of just like, hey, remember this? Like, that's not gonna fly more than once, I think.
yeah. All right, good. I'm glad. So that then I don't feel like I'm the only person who's yelling at clouds if hearing somebody else say that. And that was the thing, is the defense of Chip and Dale and the lauding of praise on Chip and Dale made it feel like one of those situations where if you had a dissenting opinion, you might get tossed into the pit.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like,
and I'm gonna say some stuff that may contradict what we were just talking about, just because I did mention that I do adore this
yeah,
film. I do actually also think that I love the story of this movie. Like, I think that there is, as thin as it may be, it is a good enough mystery movie for me, for especially compared to the old Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers TV
that's
show.
the thing. Like, I
That
understand
like
that it's trying to capture the feeling of that, and it does in a lot of ways feel like an episode of Chip and Dale. I mean,
I mean, it really harkens back to Roger Rabbit. Like,
yeah,
not to keep beating that drum, but like the idea of there being that mystery story at the root of what's driving this, it really does feel like that. And I do love like the ways in which, the main villain is a full-on toon, the ways in which they use kind of the lore of the movie to justify having the big monster fight at the end works for me. And the punches that they're willing to pull at themselves at their own expense. As much as Disney is definitely like on display full force with this, like there is definitely some stuff going on in this movie that does not always make Disney look great. The ways in which it is explained that some of their work just gets kind of dropped and forgotten. Like, that is actually kind of a core thing at Disney, right? Like is that there is so much that they sit on that's in the vault that fans out here would love to be a part of, but Disney does not give us access to it by design. To build that is like kind of core to this whole thing in this movie, and it's pretty wild that they allow that, and also, just some of the ways in which they reference the ways in which they twist it and make some of this stuff really dark. I mean, Monterey Jack's love of cheese becomes like a heroin addiction in this movie that you then actually go to like a cheese den, right? Like, and that sort of stuff. I'm a sucker for that kind of silliness. Yeah. That almost felt like that was like some Robot Chicken level sketch or something. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think here's the problem, and it all just clicked for me hearing you discuss it, because the plot of the whole we're gonna take these people and make bootlegs with them. It's already been done, and it's been done better. And this is all my opinion here. This is where it is in the tearjerker episode of American Dad, where Tearjerker is capturing famous Hollywood celebrities and then using robot versions of that same celebrity to make them do subpar work to open up the laneways to release his Oscar bait film, Oscar Gold.
Right, right.
Which that's it, and that's a 22-minute episode of a television series that does it. Because the thing that I it might just be me where I can't reconcile the plot point of why would I take Monterey Jack, right? And spoilers for Chippendale Rescue Rangers. It's been out for a couple of weeks now, so apologies if I'm spoiling it for you. But spoilers for that movie. You take Monterey Jack, why would you modify him to then have him be in bootlegs? Like, it would be one thing if he had the technology to essentially clone them, but it wasn't a perfect clone. And that's where the bootleg nature came from.
So the modifying to be in bootlegs, I think, is a twofold thing. It both takes the person out so that they cannot then come out and be like, hey, that's not me, right? And there's that whole thing. But specifically with Monterey Jack, you notice that when they bootleg him, they don't bootleg him into a bootleg Monterey Jack. They bootleg him into a whole other character. They Dumbo him, right?
Yeah.
And so there is also this idea that like with some of these guys, they're getting turned into characters. They're getting so much surgery done, reconstruction done, that they are actually becoming completely different characters. So there's also a level there to consider about that. There's a weird depth to that story that is not explored within the movie, and by not being explored in the movie, it's all just speculation about what's actually going on.
And I think that's where my biggest issue is that, like, I would like some definitive answers on this one stupid part of this film that is stuck in my head, because it would be just as simple to take them. Like, there's that whole scene where he has like parts of them that are on display. It would be really interesting if the original Monterey Jack were like lenticularized, so that there's just like the cell of him on the wall, and that's like a prison for him. And then there's a clone of Monterey Jack that they're using for the bootleg stuff. Like it's like one of those situations. It's like, is it really a bootleg if it's the real person who's doing it? Like, there's these implications where I'm like, I mean, that's still Monterey Jack. I'm still seeing the latest Monterey Jack film.
Well, and so the
with
technology,
him as Dumbo. Like,
remember, the bootlegging technology is a modification of the 3D surgery that exists within the world that is legal. That's also something that we're given. So it's not that like they didn't create that technology.
Yeah.
Like he got a hold of basically a plastic surgery machine and is using it to do this low level plastic surgery on these things. So that's the other thing, is like, you're talking about this cloning thing as if they had a choice in what they did, but they're just using the technology that's available to them within the world, and we've established the 3D technology through Dale. Like, the movie establishes that technology exists and is safe when used by the right people.
All right, I don't know. It's the thing where I'm just like, your plan doesn't make sense to me, and it really bothers me. Like, the bootleg, I get the bootlegging.
Bingo on this one, and like,
yeah,
we'll put an end to this conversation, because, as we said, we're not going to allow ourselves to get into a fight about Chip and Dale. So,
right, and I don't want to get into a fight about Chip and Dale, but it's just that
if we do, just pitch just raise the pitch on it and speed it up for a couple of seconds.
Good, right?
Everybody will think it's just part of the bit.
All right, so you know what, I have a thing that I have written down in my notepad from the very beginning of the month of May. That I wanna address, and it should be a nice way to get out of the mire of this Chip and Dale conversation.
Yes.
Should I only be tipping my Domino's driver $3?
No. What?
Okay.
How far are they driving? What's the weather conditions like?
I tip my Domino driver very well. It's not that.
I'm not asking you to like actually. Okay, wait. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Well, you did. You actually were literally asking me. Well, Devon, tell me.
No, sorry, I didn't finish that statement. I wasn't asking you as if you somehow have done something wrong. I was asking you because, like, those are the rhetorical questions that I ask myself whenever I am ordering food or delivery of any kind.
Right.
Is immediately like, why am I ordering it for delivery and not picking it up? What are the weather conditions like outside? And what time of day is it? Are kind of the top three questions. There's other questions you should ask as well. Like, but for me, like, if I'm ordering food and not going out and getting it myself, it's usually because I'm working, right? If I'm at my desk and trying to get something done and I don't have the time to do it. So that person is doing a convenience for me. On top of that, if it's like shit weather out, I'm definitely going to add some more money for that. And then on top of all of that, if I'm ordering at like prime dinner time and these people are running around and hustling ass to get stuff to me, I'm gonna make sure they get a little extra cash because like I don't like being that guy that's inconveniencing anybody. And I know that it's a business transaction, it's not an inconvenience, but just that idea that like they're dealing with traffic, they're dealing with, I mean, they're working at a time of day that probably most people are with their families and stuff like that. So there's always going to be a little extra cash for me because of that too. If I order it like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and around here that's fucking dead time, I might not, I might only do like a $5 tip instead of a $6 tip, you know?
Right. I mean, I tip most of the only reason why I get delivery, and the only place I get delivery from is Domino's, which is why this whole question sort of hit me. And it hit me because I don't know if you're familiar with the promo that they were doing at the beginning of May, end of April.
No, the only pizza promo that I've had any interest in this year was the Bat Zone from Little Caesars.
The calzone, it's a calzone and a pizza together. It's genius. It's the best of both worlds.
But the Bat Zone specifically is the one they cut into the symbol of the Batman shape.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they fold it. It's the way that they fold it up. It's still the same dough, but right. they shape it to shape like the Batman symbol. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. No, the promo that Domino's started to run.
Not the phrase I would use for it, but
for what? What?
It was a delicious mess, is the way that I would describe it.
Did you have one?
Oh yes.
I never got to have one. That's the problem because they don't deliver. You have to go to Little Caesars, and you know the reason why Domino's stepped up was because of the whole pandemic and stuff. And there's somebody who delivers to us, and it's pretty easy to like take it out of the packaging it comes in. So that there's no chance of any like remnants coming into the house or anything like that. Like it became our sort of go-to delivery. And right from the beginning, I'm like, well, first of all, you're working during the pandemic, which I am doing. So I'm going to make sure that I am compensating you correctly. And then also all of those other things that you discussed. But what Domino's started to do, and I think it was in response to, you know, staffing shortages and then possibly not having enough delivery drivers, was if you went in to get your pizza, if you carried out from Domino's, you got a $3 credit to use on the next purchase. And the way that they framed this was, we're giving you a $3 tip for delivering your own pizza.
Weird framing device. Weird.
Yeah,
we're paying you to work for us to deliver the pizza to you. We don't need to. This doesn't need to happen, Domino's. It's okay. I just came to pick up my food. We don't need to turn this into anything more than that.
But then what that did to me, what I looked at that as that is Domino's putting their foot down and saying the value of a delivery to the driver is $3. And it's one of those situations where like, is that setting a dangerous precedent?
Yeah, I would make sure that you put in there that that's what they consider to be the average, because they didn't want to calculate for every person that came in. Like, okay, you live this far away and it was a rainy night, so we normally would have tipped your driver this, so you get this one. But the next guy that comes in is like, well, you're just from the apartment complex next door, so here's $1. Like they weren't going to play that game, so they figured out an average that they consider. Now, I'd be interested to hear how they came out with that average as well. Like, did they actually go through and do the math and like survey their guys and be like, hey, how much do you get paid on a regular basis tip wise, and like figure that out? Or did they just make an assumption? Is just some dude that has never actually ordered Domino's but like runs Domino's is like, oh, I don't know, what do they normally do? $3? Sure, let's make it $3. And everybody just yes manned him. Like
they probably, because it exists, taking out of the equation any paper money, right? If they look at all the data of their paid for online with a credit card where you can include the tip data, I'm sure like they came out to the average of $3. Or, I mean, it also has to be a number where it's going to entice you back. And if it does entice you back, we're not losing money on the much, right? It's one of those like weird balancing acts. And
I have done a $3 tip with DoorDash pretty much on a regular basis. I live in a pretty decently populated suburb. Like I wouldn't call it in the city, but like city is close enough that I could spit and be in it.
Well, you're also up high, right? So the spit would get to travel down as well.
You're right. Yeah, I do have the benefit of angle. I have the high ground, Anakin. But this idea that that I could the food is not traveling very far to get to me. So that's like a part of it. Also, with DoorDash, they now tell you like, hey, this driver's also picking up 5 other meals, and you're like the third stop and all that sort of stuff. So knowing that kind of information too is it's made it a little bit less daunting to like be like, oh no, I'm making this guy come all the way out to Bountiful to drop off this food to me. But like, oh no, he's doing 10 other deliveries on the way, so
He's
it's not
delivering to my next door neighbor and my other next door neighbor.
right. So time of day, if it's like a slow time of day and it's really easy and quick for them to get McDonald's to me, it's not that big of a meal. $3 is probably a pretty average tip for what I give. There have definitely been nights where we as a family have ordered like $60 worth of Chinese, and I have definitely made sure to put like a $20 tip on that because it was like pouring out and things like that.
Yeah.
So like it's not unheard of in this house for us to get kind of over the top on the tipping thing because of our personal beliefs about about job culture out here. But $3 hits a pretty sweet average for me, I'll be honest, when it comes to the tipping thing.
That's interesting. I mean, I always tip like 15%. I round up to, like, I'm one of those. And again, it depends on the amount of food and all of that. So, but it's just one of those situations where I'm like, that is Domino's saying that every delivery is worth $3.
Yeah,
And,
well,
and I
well,
feel like that's a
you say
dangerous precedent.
well, I mean that's interesting because like you say that, but honestly, the last time I ordered from a pizza place, I got like a medium pizza and some chicken wings, right? And that came out to about $20, and 15% of that would be $3.
Yeah, that's fair.
So like that is actually a few pretty. So that does kind of hit that spot of like 15%. And the percentage thing is also part of the math for us. It's just that that percentage doesn't mean anything if, like I said, if it's like the middle of a snowstorm outside and we can't get out of the house, but they are doing delivery. We will sometimes order because the other thing is that every delivery driver out here has a four-wheeler ATV that they then use to get up and down the mountain. So
Thanks, Balto. For bringing me this delicious Burger King Whopper. Yeah, it's just one of those things that it's ever since I saw the commercial, I'm just like, this feels weird. I'm not gonna do it, but I can imagine that there are some people who see this and are like, oh, shoot, we're tipping Domino's $3.
We've been tipping Domino's too much.
Yeah, I want my money back. Or
Meanwhile,
that
they're ordering like $100 worth of pizza, and the delivery driver's breaking their back to get it to them. Yeah,
yeah, it's not great, and I don't know. It's just where I'm sitting, where I've been sitting since that commercial. And
if your question is, do I believe this corporation is undervaluing its employees? Yes.
Yeah, well, I guess the question is, this corporation is undervaluing its employees. Why are they broadcasting it? Why are they working it into a promo?
Well, you see, Devon, that's because in addition to being evil, they're also idiots.
Yeah.
I mean, like this is all pretty easy to answer, Dev. Keep throwing them at me. I like easy ones.
Well, that's it. I wanted to make sure that I'm not the only one who's looking at it like, this is strange, right? But then also, there's been this real switch to tipping on pickup food. Where do you stand on that one? Let's talk about that.
So that's actually really
well.
funny because I actually had this conversation just last night because we decided to order some takeout from somewhere, and we were going to be out going to the one state-run liquor store that's in our town. Yeah, that's the way that we have to do it out here. So we were going to have to do our weekly trip out there anyway. So we were like, well, yeah, and on the way back we'll just pick up dinner and come home and we'll have booze and chicken. It'll be great. And so we go through the math on that. I go to check out, and the wings place we went to, not only did were they like, would you like to tip on this pickup order? They wouldn't let you complete the checkout process until you filled it out in some way. Now, I could fill out 0, but at that point, I would have had to have chosen a tip, seen the final amount that they given me, and then removed that money from the equation. And it's not impossible to do. I didn't do it because there is a bit of a mental block at that point of just like, well, now I'm looking at the total amount and it's only like $20 as opposed to the $18 we were going to spend. So what the hell? Yes, just take the extra $2. Like, I don't know who that tip goes to. I don't know who it's for. Like because there was no one person in that service that came to me. And I know in restaurants there is group tipping. That is definitely a thing that happens, especially with like bartenders and stuff like that, is you get tipped out by everybody there. So I'm sure it just goes into a community pot that is all part of that math at the end of the day. I see that, but there is something about like who at any point in this transaction went above and beyond what should have been their normal job, right? And and then it becomes this whole question about like, well, what about when wait staff, like, do you not tip waiters if they just do their job and nothing more? Well, no, I still tip them because they're getting paid trash. But the problem is that I didn't talk to a waiter at any point in this. And as far as I know, kitchen staff in restaurants actually do get paid actual wages. Front of house, maybe not. So maybe that's who we're tipping in that situation. But like, yeah, it's such a weird. It's a weird thing to add to that transaction because there's not a human face to attribute that tip to. And so I don't love it. But at the same time, there are people in that chain that do kind of depend on tipping to get through the day. And so, like, I guess if I remind myself of those people in the process, then I can deal with the $2 charge on my thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I never used to tip on pickup stuff. Like when I was going in and getting the food, it always seemed strange to me. Or then, like, I would, at the most, I would round up so it was a round number when I was, like, reconciling my bills and everything like that. Like, that's sort of been an additional thing. But then with the pandemic where curbside was invented, and it wasn't really invented, but it became widespread, where, like, before you could get curbside at Applebee's, but now
it
you can
became
get
a necessity
curbside.
as opposed to as opposed to a luxury. Yeah.
And if I were doing curbside, I would always tip too, because they generally have a runner who's responsible for it, and that's essentially your waiter. Yeah. So it makes sense like that. And I started tipping, and I'll share this. I don't even mind 10% to that. To anybody who had to do curbside delivery to
we're
me.
We're going to find out that we're assholes and we're undervaluing them as much as their companies are. But yeah.
No, I mean, and that's, but I just want to say where I'm at.
I am totally on board with you. I'm just saying that as I'm thinking about the fact that we are throwing some solid numbers out there about this sort of stuff, we are inevitably going to hear from people that think that it's not enough. And
that's always going to be the argument, right?
I just want to acknowledge it here before we start getting those kinds of messages.
Fair. That's fair. But that's what I want to have the discussion, because the only reason that I want to talk about it is I saw a Twitter thing about what do you do when you tip, when you pick up the food yourself. And it seemed like, 50% of the bill. And I'm like, no, go fuck yourself, 50% of the bill. I mean, I guess if you're like Tom Brady and that's not going to affect you, like, come on. But
again,
like,
context is key. Are you tipping that much because it's a restaurant that maybe was kind of going through some rough patches with COVID, and it's your first time back? Because we definitely have partaken of that. Like the joyful return to restaurant. Like, there was definitely a while where there was a bump in gratuity from our family because we were just happy to be somewhere. And that's a benefit everybody gets to enjoy. We're happy that we're finally back out in the open. People are happy to be back at work. We're happy to make sure that they are safe going back to work. Like there's reasons for that. And again, that's when I come back to the idea that the second you can attribute that number to an actual human face, it becomes much easier to justify and understand why you're putting that number down. So like, that's why I have to, in those moments, remember that there are people in that line, in that process, that do depend on tipping in their job. And so if that is part of the deal, then I make sure that I don't get too up my own ass about it.
Right. And that's fine. But it just seems so strange to me. Like, and then, of course, because it's Twitter and the whole world can be in the conversation, you have Australian people and people from England who are like, oh, you still have to do that? Like, what? That seems ridiculous.
Yes.
Why don't you just pay people what they're worth?
Yes.
And then eliminate the tipping part. And it's like, oh man, this is strange. But it made me think where like 35% is the standard now. And I'm like, since when is 35% the standard?
15% is like low bar. I don't know if there's a standard, but I have always kind of abided by 20% being what I try to match. And then, give or taking what's going on in the context, that number changes. But I always kind of, that if a percentage is the thing that I am really aiming for, and as I stated, that's kind of like maybe the fourth question after those first three that I asked.
Yeah.
Like 20% is what I'm trying to hit. So it's kind of the last minute thing, right? Is after I decide how much I'm going to tip, I then kind of double check it against 20%. And as long as it is near that, preferably it is higher than that. But if it is near that, then I'm happy with what I've decided, right? And I don't really do much more math. I'm also the kind of guy that'll tip to the dollar. So sometimes people will get a little bit more from me because I want to hit that solid number, because I like nice round numbers on my bank account. That sort of thing. And I always round up in that case.
Oh yeah, of course. Same. It's just easier to do that. It's like, yes. I don't need it to be a 5 or a 0. I can make it a 1 or
yeah.
I don't need to be a jerk on that level. And I mean, I've always thought that it was. I mean, I remember when I used to hang out with wait staff and they'd be like, "You're a terrible tipper," and I'm like, I feel like you just say that to everybody. I feel like that's just how you feel because I'm actually tipping more than you're tipping based on percentages if you want to boil it down.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, but that whole discussion about like 50% of your bill if you're too lazy to go get the food yourself or make them bring it out to you. And I'm like, I don't know where we switched to that. Like, I understand that they're putting themselves in there, and it's why I started tipping on all pickup stuff, whether I was getting it from them or they were taking it out to me. Like, understanding that, like, there is a human element here, and they're probably not making what they should be making.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's everybody, right?
The extremely limited amount of restaurant experience that I have, front of house got paid like the wait staff. So they were paid way below minimum wage, but they were tipped out at the end of the night. Some places I know that that's not necessarily the case because front of house is a job unto itself. Like there's a lot of administrative duties that they do and stuff. So they do actually get paid full up minimum wage, if not better. Kitchen staff always minimum wage, honestly, often better. Like there's so many people in that restaurant that are now it is really truly barbaric that waiters and waitresses are the last people to actually get the benefit of at least minimum wage, which in and of itself is a problem because it's not enough money for somebody to live on.
Minimum wage isn't enough for anybody. So
exactly.
When you're making $2.13 because you're going to be getting tips, like.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the last true vestige of like barter culture that we all kind of take part in, right? Like, everybody at some point has to consider, do I tip this person or not in America? And like, when you do, like, it really is kind of this weird morality question in the end, and it's weird that's part of a business transaction.
Yeah, and a business transaction that like most people take advantage of in 2022. Yes. It's not like the early days where going out to restaurants was not an everyday occurrence.
Well, right, and like at time of your life, like that is so, yeah. It is such a weird question because it also changes throughout a person's life how they feel about this stuff. Like that person that says 35% now, they were probably the kind of person who back in college were like, well, because I can't afford it, I usually don't tip, which is the thing that happens. And that's, but then you have that kind of weird guilt the rest of your life. And so suddenly maybe tipping 35% is like making up for lost time. Like I don't like 35% is a pretty exorbitant amount of money to be tipping somebody. Again, not that we haven't done it. It just there has to be a reason why we're tipping that much.
Yeah. What about $1 a drink at the bar if you're with a bartender?
I'm a firm believer in you tip extremely well on the first round without don't consider any plans about what future rounds are going to be. Uh-huh. But then from there, you kind of judge it off of that. Like, okay, I gave them a $10 tip when I ordered like 2 beers earlier, so I'm probably gonna order a couple more drinks, and that's gonna be it. It's weird out here because a lot of places will kind of force a tab on you. Some places will not. Like, you kind of don't know what situation you're getting into unless you know the bar out here. So pre-planning for that is not necessarily easy. But I'm the kind of guy that will tip enormously upfront with the intention that I'm probably only going to get 1 or 2 more drinks. But then, off of that, I might tip an extra $1 or 2 if I get like 5 drinks.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's just, I remember that's hanging out with bartenders too, and they're like, there's always $1 a drink. And I'm like, I mean, I kind of get that, right? If I buy a $4 drink, that's like a 25% tip and whatever from there. And it evens out as the night goes on. It's something that like I've said to older people and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, what do you mean? That just seems standard to me. I don't know. Tipping is such a weird thing, especially when you consider how it is in other countries in this world. It's like a very uniquely American thing.
Yeah. Sorry, headphones died. I'm back.
That's fine. We knew those headphones were going to be a problem. We had that discussion earlier.
But yeah, tipping is a purely American thing at this point, I think, and it's something that we should really. There's a lot. We
have a lot of things in this country that we need to address, Siege, and and if I were a bigger person, I'd be like, and this is my moment where I'm saying I'm running for political office. But
no, this is the moment where we try and get you to join the anti-work subreddit on Reddit and become part of this much hated community because they can't seem to express a damn thought without pissing somebody off. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing I'd like to address. There's this weird thing that's been happening in the TV shows that I've been watching. I have four examples here. And I'm trying to
Okay.
figure out. So here's a fun fact, right? We talk a lot about pop culture on this show, right? Philosophy and all that, and how it relates to our lives. There, a lot of the entertainment we consume is a way for them to sort of put their finger on the scales of society and reflect to us how we should interact in a society. Am I completely off base by saying that, or?
I wait. You lost me only in one section. Are we talking about the creators of these things or the consumers?
Well, we're talking about the creators are creating it in order to influence the way that the consumers interact in a society. It's
Yes,
like where
people make
the
art in an
nuclear
attempt to.
family comes in of the 2.5 kids, and you
Yes.
should have two cars in every garage, and
Yeah.
you should be married, and you should be unhappy if you're married. And
Yes,
you,
when people create art, they are definitely trying to influence their audience. That is
yeah,
pretty key to making art is it, what is the word I'm looking for? Creating, I guess, a reaction within your audience is kind of key to that.
right. But I mean, I'm talking more about like the societal implications of like the TV shows where the guy is sad because he doesn't have a girlfriend. And it's like, you will be sad too if you don't have a girlfriend.
Yes, that
Yeah.
is what inevitably comes at the end of that transaction is
Yeah.
whatever they say in that does then kind of become the message. And if that messaging is like all women behave in this way, oh well, then that becomes kind of the norm and it is not good. Yes.
Yeah.
what
Okay.
what are we
So the
what is going on
messaging
in
that I
these?
want to discuss, This Is Us ended like 4 weeks ago. I had stopped watching This Is Us. It was the sixth season, so I'm going to say 5.5 years ago. I
Ever
watched
since
maybe
Milo
four
got killed by
episodes.
a crock pot, I stopped. No, I don't even like so whatever happened with him where like the toaster went off and his house exploded or something.
Oh, he survived the spoilers for This Is Us. He did not die into fire.
Oh.
After getting everybody out of the house, he had a cardiac episode and
Oh, that's
died
right.
as a
Yes,
result of
that's
that.
yeah, that's right.
So it's not even like, it wasn't even like a cool Milo died after fucking his sister and his house exploded. I might be confusing Milo Ventimiglia roles there, right? Am I doing that? Is that
I'm
my
sorry,
boy?
I've just caught on the fucking his sister part.
Yeah, because that's my boy. It's Milo Ventimiglia fucking his sister. I get
I know.
confused.
Yeah.
Sorry. But what happened in This Is Us, again, spoilers for the show that is over, and you either watched it or you didn't. It's funny because it was kind of like Lost, but instead of the mystery being an island, the mystery was these people's past. I don't know. The show was fucking weird, and I didn't really like it. I got sad when Randall's biological father died, and I'm like, he was the best character.
It did have Sterling K. Brown on it, right? Like
Sterling,
wasn't
that's
it?
where Sterling K. Brown kind of like
Yeah,
erupted into
like
the
so. I
cultural
mean, like
consciousness.
all props there for like a wealth of talent on that show.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, it had good casting and all that. Mandy Moore doing stuff again. It was nice. But what happened after Milo Ventimiglia's character died? I don't even know his character's name in the show. Like there's just a representation of it. Is their mother, played by Mandy Moore, got married to their father's best friend. And like I didn't really think about it at the time of like the whole this is how she decided to move on. But now it seems to be a trend in TV shows where like the widow or widower is sad and the person that they end up getting involved with is the best friend of the deceased person.
well, this has always been a thing. I mean, first of all, Hamlet.
Yes, okay,
But,
solid.
I mean, like the other big, I mean, the other thing that I can think of immediately when you say this is Shane from the first season of Walking Dead. I mean, and it becomes like plot significant in that show about the ways in which he actually ends up lying about Rick's, like he lies to Rick's family that he says he went back to the hospital and it was a lost cause, but then Rick comes back and everybody is like, you said he was dead, and that becomes like an issue, right? And like, and Shane's whole like trying to replace Rick by the end of that storyline is the true horror. Honestly though, his death, John Bernthal's death on Walking Dead, and the reveal of everything is a phenomenal moment of television. But like that is right there, like the best friend stepping in. I mean, isn't the movie Brothers about that? About the two brothers, one goes to war and dies, and so the other brother marries, but then like he comes back, and it's Tobey Maguire there,
Yeah,
and yeah, like this is it's a common trope
it's a
in
common trope.
storytelling.
So then, but again, usually movies are what I think of. I can think of a couple of television things and all of that, but it was three this past season where it was like central plot points. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to try to apply our brains to this question: is what is the messaging there?
Mhm.
Like, what are they trying to influence societally? Is like just marry a close friend of the person. It'll basically be the same,
No,
and
I
you'll be
think the bigger one is that you have to be married in order to move on. Like
yeah,
we somehow have equated the idea that if you lose a loved one, the only true
path to
way to break
healing.
through that is through finding another loved one. Like there's no way you'll ever be happy again unless you find somebody else to replace this person you lost. And the idea of like replacement as a form to heal grief is such a dangerous one, because like what people replace it with can be so dangerous, and the idea that you need to do that, that if you don't do that, if you're not doing that, you're not succeeding and that thus not healing, that's like a dangerous precedent as well. It's not so much who they're marrying so much as like the act that they have to get married to heal that I think is grosser.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm glad that we're on the same page because that's like the next step of it, and then it feels like weirdly perverted in the fact of like, oh yeah, the Walkers. Walker loses his wife, and Jerry loses her like fiance, and now they're hooking up, and now they're not hooking up, but like maybe they're gonna hook up again. I don't
Sure.
know. Walker has
I
gone
mean,
off
well,
the rails.
called it early, like you
Yeah,
said. It's getting soap opera-y, and if it continues down this path, that's basically all it's going to be good for. Is just
right.
like, and so like, yeah, there's definitely some awkwardness in that story, but I think that that's exactly why they employ that trope, right?
Yeah.
For in that case, they want that weird tension and awkwardness that you're talking about with that comes with this.
And then How We Roll, which I don't know if anybody watched How We Roll.
Didn't even know
Don't
you
even
were
know it
talking
was
about a show.
show, right? It's
I thought you were just saying a phrase to me. I was like,
That's How We Roll.
all right, how we roll. Let's talk about next on the docket. Yeah.
No, How We Roll is about the bowler Tom Smallwood. It is based on his life story where he was laid off from an auto construction plant and decided that like he was a good enough bowler to try to get on the PBA. So he gave himself 6 months to compete in tournaments, and then he eventually went on to become a pro bowler and was able
Nice.
to pay his whole life for that.
Okay.
And it's Pete Holmes who's playing Tom Smallwood. It's an interesting little show, 11 episodes. It's canceled, probably because it had too much heart in it,
Hmm.
as it tends to go.
Did they at least get like a resolution of a story? I feel like the benefit of something like that is that there's a good way to just tell a story in 11 episodes and just like there it is. Like it's a shame we didn't get more, but at least we got an arc. Like was it that? Was it fulfilling at least?
So it was. They did end it. I will say that it's not like Magnum PI ended. There's no more new Magnum PI, and I actually question if that's going to be the case because the big citation as to why CBS canceled it was they were tired of paying licensing rights to Universal to use their
Mm,
character,
okay.
and I really would not be surprised if NBC kept it going afterwards.
Yeah, right. If
Like
it gets picked up for like a
like
Hulu
a
or
fifth
Peacock
season or a Peacock original, or it's one of those ones where I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised. But that show, like, they didn't really know they were ending, and thank God they kind of like had it where finally Magnum kissed the character that like they'd been will they or won't they the whole time. So then like you get the headcanon if that worked out or not. Like they at least gave it a semi ending, unlike some of these ones where I'm trying to think of the show that like just Mr. Mayor. I haven't had to talk about Mr. Mayor and how if you've been listening to the show or you've been talking to me in real life, I've been off a little bit, and the main culprit for me like just not being on solid ground is that Mr. Mayor, like, it broke me. I've been dealing with a lot, right? We've all been dealing with a lot. And then like weirdly the finale episode of Mr. Mayor was the straw that broke my back. And I hate saying that, but it just was like
series finale.
it ended up being the series finale, but you would not know that if you watched the show. Like it is the most betrayed I felt by the end of an episode of the end of a run of television since the weird insert at the end of Quantum Leap season 5 that Sam Beckett never made it home. Like
Yeah,
that's
I mean, like my big go-to on that is the last couple of episodes of Arrested Development, the original series, TOS. Just because they found out that they were going to be ending soon, so they rushed a lot of plot lines, had to kind of create plot lines on the fly to wrap some stuff up. Like they were given the ability to end it, but nowhere near enough time to end it. And so you can tell in those last few episodes where just some ridiculous stuff happens, characters do things very out of character and blah blah blah. So that's why I think of that when you say that, where you feel almost kind of betrayed by the end of it. And up until we had new Arrested Development to lean on, it was kind of really a shame the way that show had to end for it.
yeah. I mean, because Mr. Mayor,
I might say even after the new, but anyway.
yeah, Mr. Mayor became sort of like my comfort television. It was what I would have on as background noise when I was speed running, and like as we were like stuck inside, it was just like something that I grew to enjoy and really like attached myself to. And I don't know why I did that. Actually, I do have some reason, because my first COVID sweater, right, to just be a complete asshole and steal the Christmas sweater of it all and apply it to this pandemic and how I've been coping, was Perfect Harmony. The church singing show.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Mayor
with our boy there from West Wing,
Bradley Whitford.
Get Out. Bradley Whitford,
and Anna Camp, and just great cast. Like that show is fantastic. I ended up buying it, and it actually all connects together because Gino Sanger, who plays Wade in that show, or Wayne in that show, was a big part of how we roll as the actual pro bowler. That like Tom was like, I don't want to be like that guy, like the cautionary tale. And Gino Sanger, great actor. But yeah, so like Perfect Harmony was my first one, and then Perfect Harmony got canceled and taken off of all the media streaming platforms. And I'm like, oh, now I'm bummed out. What am I going to do? And Mr. Mayor sort of filled that gap. And it turns out that Leslie Wake Webster was a creative force behind both shows. Like to just be that person who like, oh, look, I'm learning the names behind the shows that connect to me.
Well, what you're doing is you're figuring out why you like certain content, and it turns out you jive with this person, this particular creative on it. And it's, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's been a nice thing. But the second season of Mr. Mayor already kind of, first of all, I never even knew it was coming. It was one of those things where it ended at 9 episodes of the first season, so I just assumed, oh, COVID cut this one short and we're probably not getting any more. And then we got the weird Christmas episode that was excellent and will probably go down as lost media because it is considered part of season 2, but it is not out there with any of the season 2 streaming. And it actually was produced with part of season 1. So I don't know where it's ever going to go. If you have a copy of it, I'd love to watch it one more time because it's a very good Christmas episode of television. Trying to pull
one day more. That's all.
Right? Maybe I should. I could marry my best friend, my dead show's best friend, or I could make a deal with the devil. Those are your options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but it was all leading up to a recall election, and it ended with a debate between the candidates, and then it ended on another cliffhanger, and I'm just like, did they not know they were ending, or was their solution to be like, we're going to end this as unresolved as possible? Like, then we're like sort of making fun of it. It just was very disappointing because it was like a really great, like sort of 3-episode arc that they put together that would have like, that's never going to be resolved.
That sucks. That's a bummer.
Yeah. And I don't know, and that's the thing. But so How We Roll did not end that way. The penultimate episode, he qualified for a World Series of Bowling event because he took first in an amateur, which got his thing there. And so it was exciting. And then he was going, and he realized that, like, he does need his family there to support him and all of this. Like, it's not just my journey, it's our journey. So, like, that was good. And then the last episode was him sort of dealing with that, like, imposter syndrome of should I even be going to this? Should I go to this World Series of Bowling event? Like, am I just trying to kid myself? Am I actually ready? And it ended with him and his wife heading off to the event together. And then you know that Tom Smallwood is now a professional bowler whose story is interesting enough to net a network sitcom, right? So
Yeah, I mean that seems like that's a great. I mean, if they were doing a movie, right, like that
right,
would be a fine end for the movie, is them
yeah,
going off to the thing
yeah,
there.
because
Yeah.
you got the whole storyline of that, and then well, now we see where the next message is, and also his wife is pregnant, which was like another like sort of underlying thing. I think you'd really like the show because Taj Mowry's in it as
I would
Taj
definitely love the show.
Mowry.
What?
Yeah, it's on Paramount Plus
As
still.
Taj Mowry?
No,
Oh
no,
no.
no, no, no. Like not
Oh,
as.
I thought you meant that he is.
I mean,
Okay.
he's a human. He's a human being. It's not like an animated character where he's the
In
voice.
this true story about this pro bowler, his
Taj
animated friend
Mowry was his
Gizmo is
best
there.
friend. It's where I realized that Taj Mowry is only 133 days younger than me.
Don't split the pins, Dave.
Oh, that's a good one. But yeah, it's good. It's a fun show. You should check it out. But one of the big like B plots of that was his coach Archie, played magnificently by Chi McBride, had asked out his mother Julie White after the father had passed away, and like a respectable amount of time. It was 20 years before, and the father's been dead for like 25 years. And she said no because she was, still grieving. And then like 20 years later, she goes up to him and she's like, I accept your invitation for a date. And then they start dating. And I'm just like, this is another one of those ones where like the message is you need to be with someone. Why not your dead husband's best friend?
Well,
Even if it's 20 years later.
Yeah, the other thing is that the weird framing of like you're not my friend, you were my husband's friend, but now you can be my friend. Whereas like I think real world wise when this sort of stuff happens, because let's face it, this is also something that does happen in the real world,
Yes. Yeah.
But what happens there is that we're talking about friend groups. And I mean, even taking death out of the equation, people date within friend groups all the time. So the idea that another person within the friend group would be somebody that they do end up dating is not too absurd, especially when you start to get older and it's more about, knowing that the person knows you and knows your flaws and you know them and you know their flaws and you love each other despite those flaws. It's like that it does make sense that it does to be somebody that you've known this long time. It is just the weird framing of like the only way that I am related to you is through this person that is no longer with us. So let us now be together. Is like, well, that feels like that's a weird way to build a relationship, and that's how a lot of these things end up framing it because they just don't have time to get into this sort of stuff.
Right.
But
the nuance is lost. Yeah, and then the last one is SWAT, where the same thing, where the lieutenant
I'm sure
in
they
that
went into
show.
a truly detailed relationship building episode to make the sense of this stuff.
God, SWAT's a great show. I love SWAT. I love that the CBS remake of SWAT is 4 seasons longer than the original SWAT at this point, which only existed for 1 year, and that there's like, I mean, the movie SWAT is longer than the original run of SWAT. Let's just be honest about it. Like, so much of it, like, there's a character named Chris. She's the first female SWAT agent, and my father's like, oh, just like Chris in the movie, and I'm like, yep, and I'm glad that you understand that was made for the movie, and then this show that is claiming to be a remake of the 70s series, cribbing so much from what the movie did. Like, yeah. And it's fun as somebody who like enjoys the entire SWAT extended universe, but
the SWAT extended universe, the multiverse
of swatting. But the lieutenant, his wife passed away like 10 years ago. And what he has done and what season this episode was about is the fact that in the 10 years since you've lost Barb, you have not taken a day off. And that was the whole thing. And it's like, you need to start doing some things for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to work yourself to death. And I'm like, he's been making it work for 10 years. And like, I don't, sort of a weird messaging here. Like, I like, it's not like he's had any like slip ups. And he didn't even have a slip up there. It was just, they now have a psychiatrist who is there more often to like try to help them talk through everything that they go through as SWAT members. And she's like, you haven't spoken to me yet. And he's like, yes, because I don't have to. And she's like, yeah, but I've read your file and this is troubling.
I think that might be more of a built-in excuse to be like, he's on vacation, so we don't have to pay him for this episode. This character has decided that they're going to take the day off. He has been in
every episode, though. It is right. Like, even that episode where he took it off, and he did an episode where Luca was in charge of running the command for the thing, but that guy was still in the episode doing stuff. It wasn't even like you need to go away for a couple of weeks and Luca is in charge. It was, Luca, I'll be back at 1 p.m. So he could so and Luca got to prove himself because they're working
And then the
towards
Cat in the Hat
Luca
shows
being
up
the new
and gets a pink ring around the SWAT bathtub that they have to clean.
God damn it, not the SWAT bathtub.
You ruined it.
Yeah. So
we need to take one last little diversion before we end today.
that's
Dev.
fine. That's fine. I want to talk about it, but I want to finish the SWAT. The penultimate episode of SWAT, no, it was the second to last episode, introduced the wife of that they used to be like a couple group together, and it was a judge and he was killed, and then he was there like supporting her, and it's like, oh, now that he's taking time for himself, he's gonna get with his dead judge's wife. And I'm like, why is every show doing this story? Why, Sejin? What is the messaging behind it? But you're not wrong. It's just you need to be with somebody, right?
It's yeah. I mean, well, and to be clear, I don't agree with that.
No, I don't.
The inherent trope that's really going on is this idea that in order to heal, that you need to find yourself with a person, and inevitably wrapped up in that is that person better be somebody of the opposite sex, and they better be somebody the same color as you, and they better be all of this other shit, this horrendous stuff that TV reinforces for us, for sure.
Yeah. All right, cool. I just want to do it. So, what's your last diversion? Because we are starting to get to the end of the app. What do we got?
Just because it's only been out for literally a couple of hours if you're doing the online stuff, but this weekend they've been running the Mario Strikers beta, and I got to try it, which is rare for me, that I know what an event is going on and get to partake in it, and that's I guess when it's occurring. Did you get to try it last night?
No, I did not get to try it last night. We ended up watching Ted 2.
Have you at least downloaded it so you can
the
do some
demo?
Of the offline stuff?
I intend to do the demo later on today. It yesterday got away from me. Had a great yesterday, but the Strikers part of my day did get away from me.
I just it's fine. Clearly it did for me too, because we ended up not reaching out last night like we had talked about, which is a shame because I did get to do it on Friday night when they did the 1 hour one, and I had a couple of friends over that it was we have not had video gaming time together yet, like me and these particular friends, so it was kind of a nice little like, hey, this is the first time we're going to pass the remote around and see how this works. Always important to figure out, are these friends that you sit on the couch and play games with? Are these friends you just meet at a bar somewhere? Like, what kind of friends are these? And happy to report in that case, they were very fun to hang out and play video games with. So we did the Strikers thing, and we you can do up to 2 players online. And so we were doing 2 players, meeting up with a couple of other people, and then it's 4-on-4 matches. At least that's what it was on Friday. And we got to see some really cool power moves, see what characters are at least available now. I don't know if there's going to be more in the game later, or if they're going to like do additional characters as they go type thing. But I will say this: it feels, I couldn't help but think of FIFA the whole time, and the criticisms that FIFA is just FIFA with a new roster every year. I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting from this new Strikers that isn't just Mario Soccer again, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just not clicking with me. So I'll be very interested to see how you feel about it, because I don't love the Striker series to begin with. I think they're well made. I don't think there's any issue with the games. They're just of the sports games that are out there, soccer games are never going to be my jam. So like it doesn't seem to be doing much. Like, I don't know if I'm going to spend my money on it at this point. But if I find out more about some weirder stuff in it, then maybe I'll be all for it. And that's the big thing, is that there just wasn't enough weird.
And that's where I think a lot of people are having the problem, is the Strikers game. And the reason they're doing Strikers, the reason they're going back to it, is the last truly successful Nintendo console. And I mean in terms of Nintendo releasing games that were Nintendo games and them selling like hotcakes, was the GameCube. Which is why I think we're seeing so many resurrections of games that we haven't seen since the GameCube.
Yeah,
like with something like Strikers.
The reason why something like Wii does not fit into this is because while they sold a lot of Wii systems, notoriously they became Netflix boxes for a lot of people, especially like older families that had gotten a hold of them. Maybe they played Wii Sports, but other than that, they weren't buying a lot of Nintendo-based games once they bought the hardware. And Nintendo's whole thing has been to always sell hardware at a loss so that the software can then be where they make their money. And so that doesn't work when nobody buys the software.
Right. And also notoriously with the Wii, it became sort of like a shovelware system.
Yes, yeah, that's the other thing. Is in addition to everybody using it for Netflix, they were also using it for like dumb, like oh look, I can turn it into a flashlight.
Yeah, and those games are out there. So even though the Wii pre the Switch was the most successful Nintendo console ever selling, in terms of the library, I mean there were games on it that Nintendo would frankly like you to forget about, right? If you don't
Hmm.
bring up Super Mario Odyssey 2, not Odyssey, sorry, Super Mario
Galaxy.
Galaxy 2,
Yeah.
Nintendo will be very happy.
Yeah.
Like we just put ourselves on a list for being a show that said Super Mario Galaxy 2 because that is one of those games where they did not know how to read the room at all in terms of what people were looking for
It's
from
okay.
a sequel.
They're gonna send Mario to assassinate us, but when we take him out, Peach can just marry Luigi. It'll be fine.
Peach does marry Luigi because Rosalina is their daughter. We learned that in Super Mario Galaxy, the first one, not the second one. Heavily implied anyway. But yeah, so that's the thing. So the GameCube, we're seeing a lot of the GameCube games where they were like, let's put Mario in everything, right? And it will really come to a head if they ever do another Mario Baseball,
Yeah.
or I guess another Mario DDR or Mario Rhythm game. Like it's just one of those situations, and I feel like that's the only thing is they're trying to trend on the nostalgia of the GameCube more with the Switch, and as we continue to see the releases and the way that Mario is put into things, that does seem to be the pool that they're borrowing from. Especially when you look at things like the Mario Party games that have come out and
Yeah.
them being less like Mario 8, Mario 9, Mario 10, and more like Mario 4, 5, and 6.
Yep. Yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong, and so I'm waiting to find out what Strikers is bringing to the table in this new release, and yeah, having demoed it, I still haven't seen that, and that's not a good sign. Um,
Sanitation seems to be it because it's the original Strikers was known for the fact that the teams introduced a bunch of characters, like you
mhm.
had the Kremlin goalie, and now the fact that both goalies are Boom Boom and cannot be customized. Perhaps it'll happen later on down the line, but they've really done a lot to make the game feel less unique. Is
Yes,
how I would put it.
which is not the way you want your games to go, especially from Nintendo, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
fine. I'm sure that there's going to be some crowd out there that like unlocks the secrets of this game for me. I need them to get a hold of it first. I need to see some people streaming it that are really into it and see how I feel. Because that kind of happened with Mario Golf for me. Is I grabbed Mario Golf because I wanted it and I enjoyed my time with it at first, but I fell off it for a little bit once I felt like I had gotten what I wanted out of it. But then seeing some of the stuff that some people had been doing as they were streaming it, because they'd been streaming it for just hours a day for weeks on end, I got back into it because of some of the weirder stuff that I realized I had kind of not given its due.
Cool. It's yeah, I agree with that. Same with Super Mario Party for me. As much fun as is that what that one was, or was it the Mario Party Superstars?
Mario
Not
Party
the one
Superstars.
that you can actually use a controller on.
Yeah,
Once I saw other people playing it, and I'm like, oh, there is ways for this game to be fun.
yeah,
It's not just that. And what is appealing to me about Super Mario Strikers is if you can get a whole squad of people to be your team and be like, every Wednesday, the four of us are going to go on and play
we'll do a season.
online.
We will
Yeah.
play. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
play a season of soccer in Mario. That would be great. Yeah.
Like I would love to do that, but I mean, we're two people right now.
Yes.
We need someone besides a
Well, that's
defenseman.
literally baked into Mario Golf. Is
Yeah.
that there is actually a way to set up a tournament, and like you can go in and play as many games as you want and save up and come back to it. So like that system is something that they've already explored in their last sports game. So I'd actually be honestly surprised if there was not some type of season format that you could do in this one.
I mean, they said that was going to be part of their whole messaging with the game. We want people to put together teams and then be there to take part in these tournaments.
Yeah.
But this beta did not represent that aspect of it. Like we're gonna
I
have
will
to
say,
wait for the game to release.
just to give credit where credit's due, and the beta is so you can download a demo that you can play at any time. But what they've been doing on these nights is for 1 hour they turn on the online so that you can try out that, and that worked awesomely. We teamed up with we had two people on the couch, and then two people can meet up with you online to be on your team. That's how it's built right now.
Cool.
So we connected to our team with no problem, and then we got into a game pretty quickly, and then we played that game without issue and got through, and like there was no weirdness and lag or anything like like that. So for all of the crap that we've always given Nintendo about their online stuff, at least one Friday night when I tried this, it ran as intended. There was not a single hiccup I could really point to.
That's excellent. What I'm really happy to hear is that you can have 2 couch co-op at a time, because there are other ones where, like, it's unclear if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I can do party that way, because I would love it if Dale and I could sit here and play in a party against you and like somebody else.
Yeah.
Or there would need to be 2 people on your side. Like, I don't understand that one, and the game doesn't really give you any information about that.
So it was definitely 2 people on our end, and by all indication, we had 1 player and a CPU on the other end for our team.
That's very cool. All right, cool. So, I mean, it's something I'm going to try out the beta and we'll discuss it. While we're talking video games, just like a quick update, I finished Wario Woods on NES. And
yeah, man.
The fact that I've been sitting on it since I did it feels a little weird, but it's definitely something that happened. And I'm very happy that I did it. I'm weirdly proud of myself.
Congratulations. Your cookie bouquet is in the mail. I mean, it really is an achievement. That game, especially in the last 10, 12 levels, becomes so cruel. It is truly Nintendo hard.
So the weirdest thing, right? Siegen was always like, you should go back, you should go back, you should go back. I lost my like progress for some reason. I went back to not being able to start from level 95, and I had to start from level 90, and it was that run from 90 that got me through the game.
Yes.
So it is.
You gotta you got to warm up them muscles, man. That's the biggest thing that I have found. I've never been able to advance if I go in at my highest tier. I've always been able to advance if I drop down 5, 10 levels and then work my way up to it. There's something about warming yourself up and getting into a good groove. And once you're in a groove of that game, it feels so good. Still, like, I cannot believe 30 years out at this point, how good that game feels to once you get into it.
Yeah, it was an excellent time, and I'm glad that you didn't really challenge it to me, but you brought it to my attention. And then once it was brought to my attention, I'm like, well, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna beat this game. And it is a good time. And also, by starting from 90, I was able to gain a credit, and that one credit really saved it.
Yep.
So there you go. That's it. WarioWare is done. Last thing, and then Wario Woods is done. And then last thing that I want to talk about, and we're not going to go deeper in this, but Shorzy on Hulu, 2 thumbs up.
It's the dude from Letterkenny, right?
Yeah, it's a Letterkenny spinoff.
Okay.
So it is Jared Kesso from Letterkenny, because he played the character of Shorzy as a sort of dual role, but we never saw his face. He was always like obscured, or we saw him from the back. And the best way that I can describe Shorzy is kind of an anti-Ted Lasso, but then by the last episode, you're crying just like you were watching Ted Lasso.
Nice.
So it's a good one. I highly recommend Shorzy. And it might just be because I've played hockey, so I understand like a lot of that culture. But in talking about superstar and strikers, like the way that I was almost justifying is like, it's almost like a hockey game. But no, it's not a hockey game. It's soccer. Don't let me get distracted by the fact that they both use nets and have goalies.
Yeah, no, it's not at all like hockey in the end. Yeah. Especially this one. There's some pretty crazy stuff that can happen in this one in terms of the superpower stuff, but that was always part of it, right? Was the power moves.
That's why it's strikers and not Super Mario Soccer.
Well, and because then they can sell it as one name through multiple markets and not have to call it football on one half of the world and soccer over here. But,
right. Yeah. It's half and half. All right, cool. So I think that's everything from me. Any last things that you want to add, Jim?
No. It's good to be back doing our normal thing. As you said at the top of the show, love doing Brendan Fraser History Month. Love diving into that stuff. But there's always this like feeling of release afterwards. You know, it's like getting out of the holiday season at the end of the year, right? Like after New Year's, it's just good to just kind of be back to normal. Yeah,
I like that those get to be like our wind down episodes, the way that we set the show up. Yeah. So cool. Excellent. Thank you for being able to be growing pain back into what the show is. I realize it was a little unfocused, but they're all kind of a little unfocused, right? That's the joy of the Say Report.
I don't know why we started apologizing for it now. This has been the case since.
I'm feeling more apologetic today, Siegen. You know, after being hurt by Mr. Mayor, I understand things now.
Okay, go spend 6 hours on Twitch apologizing to every tweet you get for
for Skittles or something? Who knows? Yeah. All right. But if you would like to share your experiences with the Mario Strikers beta, Siegen is willing to hear them on Twitter at Siege versus the World.
And if you have some way to get a hold of some zombie Skittles, then make sure that you hit up Devon at Devon D. Decker and send him the info.
You just woke up today and chose hate, didn't you, Sijin? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping by, and Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sijin Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.